Okay, let's see where. Show and tell there. I was just gonna show them, it's better to do that, and show them so they know what. We return from closed session. There's nothing to report. So with that, we will have a regular session. Yeah, so please, roll call.
Councilmember Spokley.
Here.
Berlant.
Here.
Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Riddell Harris. Here. And Mayor Amara.
Present. Stand for the pledge, please. Thank you very much. We have the mayor commendations, proclamation acknowledgements, and announcements. So this will be the introduction of the new police department employees. So may I have Chief Canam come forward?
Well, good evening, Mayor Amara, City Council members. For the record, Ryan Canan, the Chief of Police. And 2 weeks ago, we were here to introduce 2 of our newest employees. And tonight, we're here to introduce 2 other new employees we have. You ready? So first, I will introduce Kathy Denton Williamson. Her career included working as a social worker in the private foster care agencies, as well as a social worker and administrator. She worked in child protection for Placer and Sacramento counties and the New South Wales government in Australia. She retired from Placer County Health and Human Services Adult System of Care in April of 2021, and after 21 years of service. She worked as a client services practitioner in child protection, then the remaining years with the Adult System of Care Behavioral Health, 5 years as a supervisor, and the remaining 15 and a half years as a program manager. So we're actually very fortunate to have Kathy with us, kind of going off the script here. You know, we talk about homelessness and we talk about having the resources and our own clinicians and someone who has all the expertise in the programs and everything that Placer County Health and Human Services offers. And then all of a sudden, like it was meant to be in magic, we got Kathy as a part-time CSO. So after retirement, she made the 6-month commitment to assist AMI Housing as a program manager, and she managed their housing coordinators in Placer, Nevada County. Her goal after retirement was to get back to her roots of boots on the ground social work. She wanted to work with the people face to face in the field, and after working 20 years with the homeless, still has a passion for the work. She enjoyed working with people from all walks of life in varying situations, and is a licensed clinical social worker with a passion for field work. Her husband and her moved from Australia 23 years ago to a small farm in Newcastle. They raised sheep, cattle, and veggies for themselves. And after 20 years, the parent rescued older Great Danes. You rescued your first Great Dane puppy, Duchess, and it's a whole new ball game. Enjoys hiking, backpacking, and fishing. And she already has family here in the city of Auburn. Her husband, Chris Williamson, does some great work in our fleet and with our vehicles. So, but welcome, Kathy.
I like that.
Next is Levi Schnetz. So Levi first gave me this introduction. So then we had to talk, and then he gave me this one, much better. I threatened I was going to have to make some stuff up about him. So Levi is our newest police officer. He was born and raised in Georgetown, California. He is the sixth child in a family of 12. He loves his entire family. That's good because that's a lot.
Yeah.
And he's happy to have so many great siblings to rely on and would never hold over the fact that they are firefighters. And he is the only police officer in the entire family.
Wow.
Graduated high school in 2015 and in August of 2015 enlisted for 6 years in the Air Force Reserves as an aircraft metals tech. Went to boot camp in August of 2016, served the Air Force Reserves for 3 years at Beale Air Force Base, and then transferred to Travis Air Force Base for the final 3 years of his service commitment. 3 of his other brothers also served in the Air Force Reserves. He enjoys watching baseball, football, basketball in his free time. And his favorite teams are the San Francisco Giants, the 49ers, and the Sacramento Kings. He enjoys spending as much time as he can with his friends, family, doing everything from camping and hiking. And being a police officer has been a goal of his for some time. He has always wanted a career that would both be challenging and rewarding, and can't think of a better way to serve than to be a police officer. So welcome, Levi. That's it.
So thank you, Levi and Kathleen, for joining Auburn. We congratulate you and welcome you to our town and service. So now this is the time for the agenda approval. This is the time set aside for council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or a change to the listed sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council. Do I have any changes requested by council?
Madam Mayor, sorry to do this, Chief, but there's a lot of community groups here for different items tonight. I was wondering
Yes.
if we could move the APD surveys to the end of the council business. It's number 9.
Yes, I have thought of that when I was going through this thing. I think that's a very good idea. Yeah, is there any other request? And how about from the community, the public? So do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Thank you very much. So that passes, and the item 9 will be at the end of the agenda. It'll be item number 13. So now we have the consent calendar, and this, all matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. As everyone knows, the city council has seen a lot of these items, and we have worked, the council members look extensively at this, ask questions before, but I don't want to pass up an opportunity for our city manager to tell you what exactly these items are. So our city manager will give you a brief synopsis of each item.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight, we have 7 items on the consent calendar. Item number 1 is the AB 361 resolution. This allows us to continue with doing remote meetings for both the city council and for our various committees and commissions. Item 2 is the addition of a position onto the Streetscape History and Art Advisory Committee, better known as SHAC. This adds the position of a local historian, and they are recommending the appointment of April McDonald Loomis into that slot. Item 3 is an authorization for bid. This has to do with the East End project at the Auburn Airport. This is a project that's already designed, it's ready to go. There are 2 parts to this that are really important though. First, tonight we're asking for authorization to bid. We are working with the developer on this. They may have somebody that can do this, and within the scope of their lease and development agreement, they are able to move forward. If they cannot move forward, we will move forward on it. This is a fully reimbursable item to the overall capital project. We want to get this project moving. The developer is amenable for us going if he can't do it, and vice versa. So tonight we're getting the authorization, but I'm just telling you, bottom line is the developer may end up doing the project themselves. Item 4 is the purchase of a program called the Apex Officer from GovRed Technology. This is a force simulator program, very high tech, VR goggles. And this is a training element for the Auburn Police Department. This gives an opportunity for our officers to train here overall over a 2-year period. It's about a $67,000 investment. And I can tell you that if we wanted to build our own force simulator, it would be a lot more than that. I know the staff's excited about it. Item number 5, this is an extension with Pac Bell Company. This is at the Auburn Airport. It's $124,000 ground lease that they operate out there. They want to extend it and we want to extend it. So staff is recommending. Item number 6 is the adoption of a contract agreement for a Community and Economic Development Director job description and the agreement with Jonathan Wright to serve in that role. This is the standard agreement for all directors that are appointed with the city. In this case, there's a small exception where Mr. Wright doesn't want a car allowance. He wants to drive the city vehicle. So the white Toyota out there, I think, is going to be his. This is the standard agreement and the job description for it. Item number 7 are amendments. Staff is recommending cost of living adjustments for our director positions, which are the 2 chiefs and the director of admin services. This is the same agreement and the same range as the previously mentioned economic and community development director. But in this case, this is a cost of living adjustment for the 2 chiefs and director of admin services. This is the same amount that is being given to all city employees in their positions. And as the economy moves for the other employees, it moves for these positions. So it's a second amendment to the agreements for Dave Spencer, second amendment agreement for Nathan Bagwell, and the second amendment for Ryan Canan. And that is the consent calendar.
Thank you very much.
Again, all right, this is on. There is also a revised resolution that I believe has been handed out to all of you for the SHAC committee item 2 here.
Yes.
Just noting that for the public as well, that what's before you and what's about to be approved is a slightly different resolution that creates the position in addition to making the appointment. For the Community and Economic Development Director position, Brown Act requires an oral report of the salary. The proposal is for $154,500 and other benefits in that agreement. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion or just any sort of input?
Do you have any public comment, Madam Mayor? Is there public comment?
Okay. Any public want to take any item off the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none.
Madam Mayor, I'll move approval of the consent calendar as submitted.
I'll second.
Councilmember Stokely,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris. And Mayor O'Mara.
Yes, thank you very much. That passes. We'll now move to public comment. This is the time provided so that the public may speak to the council on any item not on the agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. The council cannot act on items not included on the agenda. However, the items may be automatically referred to staff. Council members also have an opportunity to speak on any item not on the agenda at this time. Do I have any council members who would like to say anything? First of all, Councilman Berlant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just really quickly wanted to mention and remind everyone that there's a town hall meeting this Thursday that the fire department is hosting regarding real estate inspections for defensible space compliance. This is Assembly Bill 38 that passed a while ago that requires documentation of a property's compliance with wildfire protection measures. I will be joining the chief as well as members of our Fire Safe Council and a Firewise community in town to talk about those home inspections. So hopefully you can all make it. I believe that potentially this might be live streamed, but I'll have to see if the chief can nod his head yes. So those who can't make it, hopefully we'll be on the various social media platforms. So
I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
you said this Thursday, what
This
time?
Thursday, 6 PM here in the council chambers.
Council chambers. Thank you
Yes,
very
and I
much.
appreciate that it'll be live streamed. Hopefully we can then watch it subsequently because I have a PCTPA and El Dorado County Planning and Transportation Agency joint meeting the same time in Cool.
You have to wear headphones then
I
during that meeting
know,
to
so,
watch
but,
it.
but I'd like to be able to see it afterwards. If it's recorded. Thank you very much.
It is going to be streamed live on their Facebook page, and then we as well are going to upload it to the city's YouTube page, so it will be available to view
Perfect.
after the event.
Thank you so much.
Anytime. Yes.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to say a big thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for all of the work that they did on the 4th of July celebration. The parade was great. Fireworks were great. And thank you to everyone who participated, and especially our police and fire who are out there and our volunteers. I saw a lot of volunteers helping with traffic and other things out there. So thank you to everyone. It was a great event and everyone had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, I'd like to echo that as well. I just wanted to announce, of course, that there is a barbecue. It's open up to the public for the Tevis, which is on Saturday. The barbecue is actually Wednesday at 6 PM. It's in the open field next to the Overlook Park. So 15
Gum Lane.
Gum Lane, yes, on Gum Lane, $15. And so would certainly encourage everyone to come out. We've got 100 riders this year. And so it should be a great time. So that's Wednesday and that's at 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment? Okay, now open to the public. Thank you. Miss Annie Bowler, would you like to step up?
Hello, I'm Annie Bowler and I'm on the Auburn Sustainability Committee. And my focus has been waste management. And we've tried to zero in on some of the worst infractors in our waste. And one of the key one is plastics. To give you a real graphic example of why we need to address plastics, in the state of California, each year, we are throwing away 80,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools full of plastic, most of which is not recyclable. Okay, let that sink in. It takes 450 years for every bit of plastic to disintegrate, but it doesn't compost like regular stuff. It becomes microplastics, which are toxic, and they end up in us, in the fish, in our waterways, in all of us. And so it's just really something that we need to turn around and stop doing, because I know it's a handy source of things, but there's some good news. There's numbers on the bottom of each bottle of every plastic item just about now. This is plastic 1. This is the most recyclable. The reason why it's recyclable is because there's a market for it to purchase it. So then it can be utilized again and again. So that's a good thing. There's about 7 types of plastics. Most of them are not very recyclable. The worst of them is this dear one, which is styrofoam. It's called polystyrene. There's 2 types of polystyrene. There's hard polystyrene. I've got my little tricks bag here. I can't find it in here. Here's regular old styrofoam. It's hard. It's like forks from to-go boxes, CD cases. Those are polystyrene. And then, of course, styrofoam. Why is this polystyrene so bad? Well, if you eat out of this box, and I'm sure all of us have gotten to-go food at some time that's come out of a box like this, it actually loses, or drinks out of it. If it's hot products, it actually loses weight. So this product ends up inside you. They've done a test and every one of us has some polystyrene in us right now. We do. And it is a known carcinogen, and it also causes major hormonal problems particularly for women. And so I don't know about you, but I'm never eating out of another styrofoam box in my life. And I encourage you to do the same for you and your family. So what we want to do, Sandy Amara and I, along with the students from Placer High School that are on are members of the environmental club, want to go around to the restaurants, contact the restaurant owners and let them know this. We're going to talk about a couple of topics and we'll cover another one with you another time. But we want to talk to them about this and give them some alternatives. There are alternatives. I used to think, I own the flower farm in Loomis, and I used to think these boxes were great. They're cardboard. Well, guess what they're lined with? They're lined with plastic. Okay, so they compost right down into those micro bits that go inside us. So that is honestly not a good option. Straight cardboard is fine, but that's hard to find. But this is made out of sugarcane fiber. This is one of the products that, in fact, this is what we're using right now. I just got it from my restaurant a minute ago. And it composts. In fact, John has been doing a little experiment with his thing, and is it composting down or no?
Okay, the sugarcane one did. The one made out of the corn,
Corn,
well, yeah, the corn, not so much.
not so much. Okay, so
Just being
this,
honest.
this one, no, we,
That one worked, the other one.
okay, well, and this is what we're going to recommend. Frankly, they're equal price to this, just about. So it's not a problem. They're readily available. So I'm researching other products. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that that's what we're up to. If you have any questions or concerns about it, please let us know. But every one of the members on the sustainability committee kind of has their area of focus, and mine happens to be waste management. And we're just trying to do real practical things to move us forward with our environmental policies. So thank you.
Thank you, Annie, and we appreciate the education that you're giving our community. And almost everybody but me has young kids, so I think they really appreciate knowing what you have told us here tonight,
Yeah.
and the impact that it has on our system and our environment. So thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate your
You're
help.
welcome.
Do we have any more public comment?
Yes, Mike Holmes. I don't have a lot of packages to show you, but anyway, I wanted to point out, as some of you know, Florence Ledeck died earlier this week, I guess, who was the elected city clerk for Auburn for over 25 years. And
You're taking away all my my adjournment info here, but you can go ahead.
okay, well, I beat you to it
Yeah,
then.
you
Okay. Anyway, I thought it might be appropriate for the city to send a wreath or something to her funeral to recognize her work on behalf of the city of Auburn. Also, I'd like to mention again certified local government. And this has been going on for some time. I'd like to suggest that each member of the city council notify the city manager that the HDRC would be interested in hearing a briefing on certified local government, what it involves and what the advantages or disadvantages are. Not that the HDRC is going to approve anything, but at least get additional information, because I think there's been some misinformation that has been floating around for too long.
I just want to interrupt, and I normally wouldn't do this, but I believe that the RDC already took action and didn't want to have a presentation on this. I don't,
No,
That might
well,
be a
well,
different,
okay, hold off. Just
so.
Different members.
what they said is they wanted the city manager to request from SHPO that the brief be given,
Mm.
and that a certain number of city council members would request that the city manager do that, so that we have an opportunity to hear the pros and cons from SHPO as to what certified local government is all about. And just for your information, the closest city to us, well, not the closest, but in terms of size, Truckee is a certified local government, and they've been using that for some of their historic development. Also, I wanted to mention that the California Cultural and Historical Endowment also has funds available for various historic things that may be going on in this community. As you may or may not be aware, when we did the the School Park Preserve Project, the California Cultural and Historical Endowment provided over $388,000 for the restoration of the Cooper Amphitheater, which is in the School Park Preserve. So those funds could be available should we want to move forward and try to acquire some of those. So anyway, that's it. Thank you. Sorry to take your thunder away, Madam Mayor, but
No
well,
problem.
you can continue. And
With the request to have HDRC listen to the certified local government, I'm supportive of having them at least hear the pros and cons and some sort of version that's abbreviated but yet to the point. Personally, I don't know if anybody else. on city council.
I don't support that. With all due respect and with the most respect to our former councilman here, I looked into this at length. We've talked about it so many times over the years with Planning Commission and HRDC and so forth, the city council. And so I would not support asking the city manager to continue this discussion at this time. I feel like the HRDC has already acted, the city council, so I just wouldn't be supportive. So, but I don't know if we need to have a vote, but I wouldn't. Yeah.
This wouldn't be the
now.
time for the vote. I don't know if we need a vote. I guess we can get some,
Well,
do we just need direction, lawyer?
I'm not asking for a vote. I'm just asking.
Let's hear from the.
And so you can provide direction to staff. For voting, it would need to come back on a future agenda as a future item.
Well, then I would like to do that.
Well, the impression I had from the HDRC was that if 2 or 3 members of the city council requested it, that the city
But
manager,
it has to come before the council for us to request it, is what I think the attorney is saying.
well, you just mentioned that you were in favor of it. Now, if we can get 1 or 2 other people in favor of it.
So it's not agendized, so I don't think the rest of us can talk about it. We each have a planning commissioner that sits on the HDRC, and I think that if they have that discretion to bring it forward if they want to.
Well, they're not willing to do that.
Well.
It was turned over to the city council to request that the HDRC receive the briefing.
So we will have that as a future item and see what the city council wants to do to request it or not.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that.
And staff has the direction. We'll bring it back with a little bit of information. Maybe we'll expand a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Background and all that. Okay, so that brings us to item number 10.
Mayor Amara, can I do one more public comment?
I'm
real quick?
sorry, you came over and told me that.
No problem. This email was received before the meeting. It's public comment. It's been provided to the council and it's available in my office for review.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, on this public comment, I'd like to see if we can direct this to staff and maybe put the homeowner in connection with either the Placer Land Trust or ARD, who are, I think, the appropriate places for open space. I think myself, it's a great idea, but I'm not sure if this city doesn't run a parks department, so they may be better entities to
Yeah.
see what the options might look like.
I'm supportive of that. And in fact, my email back to her was that. So,
It also might make sense to look at if that's the property that we want to do that. There are several properties that have great views, and so that might be worthwhile just taking a survey of what's available and making a judgment that way too.
Thank you. So now we're on to council business. Item number 10, report from the Wildfire Public Safety Advisory Ad Hoc Committee. It's an informational presentation from the Wildfire and Public Safety Advisory Committee, who, by the way, did a great job, met a lot, and we're very appreciative for all the hard work that they did. And Steve, the chairman, will.
I clapped.
Well, we haven't given the presentation yet. Okay. Well, I would first like to start off. We started this a long time ago. The council asked a group of us to get together and talk about this issue. In February, we got together, and with the help of the city manager and the fire chief, they put together a syllabus for us to go through and study the issues we're facing. And so first, I want to thank the city manager for that. I'd also like to thank our committee, if I may take a couple of minutes here. Erin Galloway, where she was here. Oh, there she is. She took our notes and our disjointed thoughts and put it into a narrative that you all received with your packets. If I had to do this, we'd still be waiting. So she did a great job. I just want to thank her for that. We also had Debbie Greenacre, Linda LaRue, Bernie Schroeder, Lynn Tennell, Frank. Okay, now I've practiced this. Udvar Haley. I did it. And then Tim Woodall. And as we said, we started meeting in February, and it was a long process, longer than we had anticipated. I know you all wanted us to report back some time ago, but this was too important to miss a step. And so I feel that we did a fine thing. You did receive a packet from us. I would like to go over the summary of it and then see if you have any questions. And you're gonna have to put up with my reading, so I apologize. The Wildfire and Public Safety Advisory Ad Hoc Committee, in consultation with the city manager, fire chief, and police chief, agrees that the city of Auburn faces significant wildfire risks. In its consensus, it is the consensus of the committee that there should be 3 separate areas of focus in addressing these risks. Number 1, education. Number 2, prevention. And number 3, public safety and emergency response. An increased emphasis on education is the most cost-effective strategy the city can employ. We encourage the city council to utilize the Greater Auburn Area Fire Safe Council and Auburn's Firewise communities to aid in the necessary work of educating homeowners, residents, and business owners on the importance of defensible space, structural hardening, and emergency preparedness. The city can play a vital role in aiding the Fire Safe Council and Firewise communities in providing resources, sharing the city's fire goals, and encourage the growth and effectiveness of the Neighborhood Firewise Citizens Group. Other education efforts should focus on ensuring residents are signed up for emergency notifications, know evacuation routes, and have evacuation plans. The committee recommends that the city aid in getting more Firewise communities established, so that the education process can flow through these neighborhood groups. If education outreach is properly executed, much of the prevention work in the neighborhoods will be completed by property owners. These owners and residents need to harden their homes and create defensible space by clearing their properties and reducing fuel in the zones around their homes. Homeowner subsidies and rebates for doing this work could increase engagement, and the city could therefore prioritize assisting residents in obtaining financial assistance, including through state and federal wildfire risk reduction programs. Increased home assessments, fire inspections, and code enforcement will aid in accomplishing this work, and fees generated could help cover the cost of implementation. The committee agrees that there must be a significant commitment to long-term fuel reduction work in vulnerable areas of the city, including Auburn shaded fuel break. Recurrent treatment of these areas is essential in maintaining reduced fuel loads. The committee acknowledges that there are significant costs associated with maintaining these lands and recommends that various funding options be explored, including grants, taxes,
and extracting commitments from large landholders like the Bureau of Reclamation and Union Pacific Railroad to finance the maintenance costs of these lands. In preparation for a wildfire in the city, the committee finds that there is significant needs to be addressed. There are many roadways in vulnerable neighborhoods that are far too narrow and in poor repair, which will make evacuation difficult. These roads need to be widened and repaired. The committee also believes that evacuation plans and routes should be documented and distributed by the city and through the Firewise communities. Additionally, the committee believes that the regional approach to the fire and public safety could result in greater efficiency by reducing local costs while increasing available resources. The committee therefore recommends the city council do its due diligence by exploring whether contracting with CAL FIRE and the Placer County Sheriff's Office could reduce costs and increase services to the city of Auburn. Finally, the committee supports maintaining the community risk reduction manager position, as this person can coordinate the city's efforts, working with local agencies, the Greater Auburn Fire Safe Council and Auburn's Firewise communities, and can pursue fire risk reduction funding opportunities such as state and federal grants. So do you have any questions?
So anybody from City Council have any questions of the chairman? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Steve, for your presentation tonight. And I'll just echo, I appreciate all of your members coming together. I know there were diverse ideas and
Absolutely.
opinions, and I think that that's really when you come, to a good place when you're not starting from the same location. You really get a good breadth of ideas. I was curious, out of the 23 recommendations and kind of areas of focus, did you have any discussion of prioritization? In the report, it's broken up really by category, but I'm curious if there was any discussion on how you prioritize those 23.
Well, education being the most important. We can't stop a wildfire if it starts. All we can do is prevent it from damaging our properties. The best thing we can do, is I think it lays out pretty clearly here, is educating our residents about what they can do to help themselves and then their larger community. So I hope that answers your question, but.
Yeah, it does. I guess my follow-up to that would be, and maybe I'll come to the follow-up as well, but the next piece of this is, did the committee have discussions of what's the next step? Is the next step that we take these 23 and have city staff, prioritize it back to us as the council? Obviously, this provides a critical roadmap to us
Correct.
to hopefully kind of determine what's important to you as a community. And then some of these, we're going to need to figure out whether we spend the time and energy applying for grants. And I know there's a section here on taxes that the committee did not support. And obviously things are very different than they were, when we went to the voters with Measure S. But I'm curious if you guys had any discussions on now what? Now that you have this roadmap delivered, what's the next step?
Sure, let's see what the city council has to say. I mean, seriously, that's really what it was, to deliver the report to you and then see if there was, what your response was. You brought up taxes, and that was a very contentious item. Was not supported by the committee overall, but we couldn't find a consensus. There were some of us who had various ideas. I think as a group, we said that if there was to be a tax, the fairest thing we could do was a sales tax, much like was tried before. But we could not come to overall. Nobody really wanted to raise taxes or wanted to come up with that idea.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I think we've been able to refinance a pension obligation bond that saved $500,000 a year, allowing us to fund the firefighters that we had wanted to do. Many of these items, though, need funding, but several of them are included already in the city's wildland urban interface strategic plan. I'm curious, in kind of that overlap, is it the committee's ideas or your thoughts, or is it back on us to say, okay, here's some new ideas that need to go in there? Or back to, from your opinion, is this just helping us kind of reprioritize those focal points?
I think it's more reprioritize. I think a lot has been done in our community and surrounding communities on how to prepare for a wildfire. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel, and I think the committee was very clear about that. It was ideas. We already have our neighborhood organizations already working. Yeah, fireways organizations already working. And that it's already here. It won't be that much effort to do it. There are costs associated with a lot of this, but it was back
And
to you for
I
that.
think in all fairness, in the middle of their meetings, we hired the community risk reduction manager. And
Right,
I
we did.
noticed that is a very important position that you refer to get some of these projects done. So,
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we were very supportive of that when Dave said that they were in the process of hiring that person.
yes.
Because you can't do any of this without somebody or someplace coordinating it.
Right.
So that's all my questions. I do have a few comments at the end. Thank you again, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Steve, thank you very much for your report. Well done. As I recall, when we talked as a council about putting this group together, it was in response to a presentation that we got from the chief where we had a risk. I knew I was going to forget the community risk reduction manager, but there was a whole series of staff below that person
Sure.
that we were wondering how would we afford? And did the committee talk about those other staff members in your
Briefly.
deliberations?
Sure, we did talk about that. Then it got back into into funding, and we started having conflicts within the committee about how that could happen, how we could afford that. Part of or maybe one of the failures of the committee is we didn't have a lot of education in the budgeting of the city, and it would have taken us another month or two if we had added that to it. So there was a lack of understanding of where funds come from for the city. And so then there was talk of magic money. Oh, well, it's just how they budget it, or there's always money there if you need it. And some of it turned into fantasy and some of it was reality where, we just couldn't come to the bottom recommendation that this is how you're going to fund it. We recognize that there was significant costs in putting this together and funding what's going to need to happen. Obviously, one person can't do all of this within the city. I hope that was clear enough.
It was.
We weren't real clear about that, but I think you get the message.
Yeah, I think just like we as a council had questions on how are we going to afford all of this.
Yes.
And I think those are still questions that are in front of us. Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thanks. I want to also express my appreciation for everyone. I know it's not an easy thing to work out, and that's part of the reason why we enlisted your help. So I appreciate everyone who worked so hard on this. Can you go? I'm curious about the conversation around exploring contracting with CAL FIRE and and Placer County Sheriff's Office. Can you go into that conversation a little bit more and explain kind of what the thinking was?
So we thought we're constantly reinventing the wheel. CAL FIRE is doing a great deal of work right now in Placer County in doing inspections, doing exactly what we want to have done. But we're reinventing the wheel. Is it the best use of our dollars? Is it the best use of taxpayers' dollars to creating something different and implementing it within the city when it's right around us? Can we coordinate with CAL FIRE in their efforts as we sit now and using that coordination to achieve the same goal? Yeah, we sure could. But the idea was not to take it off the table.
Okay.
I don't think that's clear. The idea was there might be a bit, would it be better if CAL FIRE were running this area? I don't know that. Our committee doesn't know that, but they said we should really be thinking about that just because we're duplicating efforts.
Okay.
If that's clear.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Councilwoman Ridderhurst, can I ask a follow-up
Go for
of
it.
that real quick? In the committee's discussions, was that contracting out for full fire protection for the full fire department or just for fire prevention services? And then back to the Placer County Sheriff's Department, was that discussion for contracting out police or contracting out fire dispatching? Just trying to get clarification.
So let's separate the two. Yes to both when it comes to CAL FIRE. What can we do together, coordinate together to achieve these goals? And the other part was the larger question. Would it be better for the city? We didn't know, but would it be better for the city if they incorporated fire service in our town as opposed to what we have now? We don't know. When it comes to the APD, it was exactly that. Would it make better sense to be using the sheriff's department or our current system with the Auburn Police Department? And that was the discussion that took place. It didn't go really in depth other than we wanted to make sure that we weren't duplicating effort that we can just borrow. back to CAL FIRE again. If that's clear.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I liked that you were kind of going towards the education piece with low cost, no cost.
Yeah.
You did say that several of the things that we would educate people to do would be expensive and we would want to do rebates. Is that what you're thinking, that we would have someone who could go for grants for that? Or how is the funding thought of for, because I mean, I
Ideally.
love educating people. I have T111 all over my house and there's big trees all over everyone's neighborhoods that they're probably not going to cut down. So I'm just trying to figure out, and if they did, it'd be really expensive. So I'm just trying to figure out, education goes so far about what they can do, but trying to actually do those things normally costs money that maybe they don't have.
Exactly. We did have that discussion and we were given examples of grants that were obtained up in Grass Valley
Okay.
in their fire suppression committee to help people that could not afford some of this. It's expensive to take out trees.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're too old to take the trees out or to do it ourselves. And so we have to hire people. That's what we were looking at. There are grants available. Does the city have someone who write those grants? I don't think they do at this time, but it may be something we want to look at. The committee overwhelmingly thought grants, these type of things could fund a lot of this. I wasn't as chair, wasn't necessarily in support of that personally.
Okay.
I think whenever you have a program, you have to have a constant funding source for it.
Yeah, grants you look for more one-time.
Yes,
expenditures.
exactly.
Yep.
And I think the committee would agree on that. Exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
That's all I have.
I have quite a bit to discuss on this, but just for questions, I had similar questions as Councilman Berlant with regards to priorities and funding.
Sure.
I really did want to take this opportunity to thank you so much and to thank the committee for tackling this effort. I know that Councilman Berlant and I discussed this at length before we brought it to the council, what we were hoping to see. And I really appreciate seeing, this is kind of a nice catch-all document that talks about the various things and actions that we can take.
Mhm.
I'm very supportive on the community, Firewise community work and so forth. But given that we've kind of already talked about the priorities and the funding issue, I just was curious, we didn't have any discussion about the chipper program.
It never came up.
Yeah, because I know that there's been a lot of folks, my neighborhood and other neighborhoods that have talked about a chipper program and that might be an easy thing to do to help facilitate the
Certainly.
removal of trees and things of that nature. So I just noticed that was missing and I didn't know if it didn't come up or it was just something that you said, no, we don't want to talk about it or.
So I'm just one member. If Aaron or Frank remember different than I do, I don't remember it really coming up.
Okay. So I don't know, Madam Mayor, if you want to have public comment and then we can, because I have some discussion and some suggestions on some next steps.
Great, thank you. Let's hold off on that. What I think might be beneficial is if we have the fire chief and maybe any of the committee members, if they want to come up and add something to it. I know the fire chief was part of the committee. And then would members want to come up and no pressure if you want to add something or if Steve misrepresented, feel free. No, I'm just.
Oh.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. For the record, Dave Spencer, your fire chief, and I too want to thank this committee for all their hard work. They spent a lot of time working through this process, and I felt that they came out with some real broad stroke, areas that we need to focus on and opportunities to continue to improve. As your fire chief, I'll tell you that my position is that although I support education, we brought forward a contractor that identified our key risks, and that is home-to-home ignition. And so for many, many years, as you know, we've talked primarily about the shaded fuel break. And that was back in the days when we didn't have these large growth fires. So at this point, I can honestly tell you that the shaded fuel break will help, but it's not going to stop the fire. So what our goal is to ensure that homes are hardened enough and have enough defensible space to be able to stand alone as the fire comes through, and then we can come in behind it and keep those homes standing. That's really the essence of what this is all about. Now, as the committee pointed out, there are many ways to get there. I think it is a combination of education. It is a combination of enforcement of our current city codes. As we move forward into the future, I think that you're going to see some legislation come forward that's going to mandate home hardening and defensible space. And I think that's going to be a major impact to our community. I'm of the position that the sooner that we get in front of that and start moving in that process, the better off we are, both for expectations of our community members, but also to save our city. So those are the comments that I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have directly.
Do we have any questions for the chief?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for that, Chief. The question that I'd asked Steve earlier about the prioritization, not to put you on the spot tonight, and it's all right because I have a feeling that this is going to come back in a future meeting. But any thoughts on how we prioritize the 23 items that are in here? Do you have specific thoughts? Do you think that's a homework task that you and or other city staff should be charged with doing, and then bringing that back to a future council meeting? What's the next step here?
Yeah, I think for me, the low hanging fruit is recognition that AB 38 with real estate transaction is now law. So that is really the foundational platform that we're moving forward with as a state. So that being said, inspections of properties or parcels, both vacant and ones with existing structures, that inspection and ensuring that those properties are compliant with our city codes and ordinances is really key. But what goes hand in hand with that is the education. And I'll use the simple example to say that when we talk about home hardening, we use a list of low cost and no cost items all the way up to the high cost, such as double pane windows, Class A roof, those kind of things that are really expensive. The reality is that any work that we do to improve that home hardening and improve that defensible space, and our terms are changing, or our concepts are changing to zones, 0 to 3 feet out. We want to remove all of that vegetation that's flammable. We don't want people to cut down trees. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking them to limb them up. So those are examples of the education part that goes with the home inspection. And I think in the absence of those two things together, I think we're just continuing to react. And so I think trying to get in front of this and trying to build our program so that we're moving forward in a purpose-driven process. So again, I'll underscore it to say, in my mind, the two key things that came out of this report is the inspection program and the education, and they go hand in hand.
So thank you for that. First off, you same question I asked for Steve as well. You have a WUI strategic plan already. Many of these items are already in there. Some of these are not. What's your thought process, or have you thought about how you maybe do a second version of that WUI strategic plan, which I know when you brought it to us, you said it's a living document. You made tweaks to it. Are you planning to already to incorporate some of these items, and maybe even now with the accomplishments of others, these others can reprioritize within the work that you're doing and the work that you have with the new community risk reduction manager and even the fire department staff doing?
Well, that's exactly it. I'll use the CRR manager as a way of an example for our discussion. Now that we have somebody that's in place that is getting properly trained up and being able to be an asset, to be able to organize our communities fire-wise, assist the Fire Safe Council, those are leverage points that we can use and really move dramatically forward. Whereas prior to this, we were kind of just stumbling through it. And so now I see great progress on the horizon as we look into the future for, again, not just education, but continuing to build real programs that we can actually demonstrate risk reduction. And when I say that, what that looks like is that any homeowner that takes action, if we were to put it on a 100-point scale by way of example, we want them to be at the 100 points to really achieve everything that they can achieve. And when we do that, that's fantastic. But every bit of effort achieves that. And then when we can show that statistical data of improvement, we not only can identify areas of strengths, but we can also identify areas of weakness. And that's where we leverage. And I think to your question is that right now what I have is I have a CRR manager and I have my line staff. Those are the assets that I have to work within. And so I'm going to do everything I can to work within my assets to get our community safer with whatever means we can, because it's that important.
And, I think it's important too, that we recognize we just hired a grant writer too. So that's something that maybe we can tap into. And then, I don't know, did you have more questions?
I don't.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And My question is with the Firewise communities, can we put some of that on the Firewise communities to enforce the homes in their areas? Or are they currently doing that?
Yeah, great question. So currently there is discussion among our key stakeholders prior to our Thursday night meeting about that very issue. And there is not consensus. Some members of our community think that Firewise is doing everything they can and that's the best program. Others think, no, that's not the case. We're not accomplishing everything that we need to accomplish. Now, that being said, absolutely, we want to use them as leadership, as educators, as those kind of things. But I predict that if you try to empower a homeowners association or a Firewise community in an enforcement-like effort, you invite friction and difficulty. And I think that's why we have city staff, is to be able to take that position on. Now, certainly there's a lot of opportunity to use them to assess, provide data, to provide feedback
That's more of what I was talking about.
yeah. So, but I think those two
And some
things.
subtle pressure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think absolutely that competitive nature certainly is a big key player too.
Thank you. So is there anyone else from the public? Would anyone like to come forward and? Okay.
Around working with CAL FIRE or another contractor, I know that there's a level of, you don't get as much of a connection with the community and you maybe don't get to build that relationship as much, but have you looked into using third parties for tasks that they would be, might be good for an outsourcing or using a contractor for, including CAL FIRE to kind of supplement what you're doing?
Yeah, I'll put those into two categories. One, I'll use the private contractor. I think Councilmember Spokley asked me about this, several months ago. This is a new space, and what's happening is there is a flood of folks that are coming in for profit to do this type of work. I've seen a tremendous amount of advertising for that to say, we're going to certify you that you are a home hardened place. But the problem is that they're using satellite imagery. They're using some low level workforce to help them educate or try to capture that information. But there is no quantification or qualification that goes with that. Whereas we actually have city ordinances that outline what that is. So that's the problem with our private contractors currently. Not to say that we can't find somebody to do that work for us. That being said, I think the reality of it is we have 5,000 parcels or homes that we have to get to. And so that's a heavy workload. And they're a private or for profit. So somewhere in there is a balance. So that's that part. Now, I can't speak on behalf of CAL FIRE, but what I can tell you is my initial discussions with our partners, up the road and the Nevada UBIC Placer unit. The discussion that I have with my counterpart is that there is no interest in providing these services to local government. That has been a thing that has happened over many, many years, and it has become less and less unless there is a full integration of full fire services. The reason for that is because their assets are thin. And I think I would say Councilmember Berlant could certainly speak to the idea that CAL FIRE is continuing to have just as many staffing issues as we are. So when we talk about the defensible space folks that you see driving around, there are only a few, and they have many more than we do. So you talk about the workload that goes with that. You can see that it's really kind of in this environment. We're not there yet. It's kind of set up for failure. And those are my observations. So, but again, I don't want to speak on behalf of CAL FIRE. I can just tell you that when we have our workforce and we're using it with our connection, I think we can do it better and cheaper.
Okay, I just wanted to respond to that piece of that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So is there anyone else that would like to come forward and ask questions or give their comments? Yes.
Bob heads our neighborhood Firewise community program. So
Bob. And his lovely wife is in the audience
Yes.
watching everything he says.
Used to be the dynamic duo, and now it's just dynamic. Anyway, I'm Bob Snyder, 100 Rena Avenue, Auburn, California. And as a citizen, I've probably been involved in this as long as anybody else around here. Started 20 plus years ago, started the Fire Safe Council with Kevin and the current fire chief at the time. I really thank you for starting this conversation again and appointing the committee. It was an impossible task for them to come up with meeting all of your expectations. I just think that was beyond their reach, unless you gave them several years and maybe $500,000 for consultants and things like that, which I don't recommend. Anyway, they did a great job. They identified the pressure points, and I'm going to try to focus in on you because I used to be on the city council, and you worry about things happening in your city. And I can't imagine being on the city council and having this threat out there and what the meeting would be like in the months after Auburn burnt to the ground, and what we would be saying about what we did and didn't do and why we should have done differently or whatever. So I'm trying to get you excited about doing something. And prioritizing this list would be a good start. You said you hired a grant writer. I don't know what part of fire that person was going to be, but I'm going to suggest that he or she shouldn't be writing any other grants except fire grants until you're up to here in grants. Because that's the one thing you don't have is resources. And the grant program has provided resources in the past and will continue in the future. I think the system is terribly inefficient. You can't plan, you can't prioritize. You have to tailor the grant to the needs of the agency instead of your own personal needs, you know, what you think is the most important thing to do. But it's the system we have. And I don't see the state or the feds pulling the plug on the grant system anytime soon. So prioritize and get your grant writer writing until there are no more grants to apply for. We've been pretty effective in using those grants, built a shaded fuel break with them, a lot of other things. What's not in the grant program is helping the residents with what the chief says is the most important thing that we could be doing today, and that's hardening our residential stock. I'm a builder, very interested in all of these things, just fascinated by it. And I've hardened the hell out of our house, probably to the tune of, I don't know, somewhere below side of $100,000. Siding, roofing, windows, all of those kind of things. So it is expensive. Some of us can afford it. Some of us have the interest. Some of us are going to soccer practice. They don't know what's going on. And I don't want you to expect them to know. They're leading their lives. They're doing their thing. So it's up to you to prioritize. Try to get the grants. Encourage people to harden their homes. I don't want you to lean too hard on the fire-wise communities, because it's 6 people who raise their hand in the community of 200 homes. You know, and they don't have any control over everybody else. They just said, well, let's send out an email and telling everybody we're going to do something. You know, it isn't going to get you where you need to go to be safe from wildfire. I wish I could say it was. It's not. The Fire Safe Council has been meeting regularly for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, 15, 20 years, and does a lot and thinks about these things. But it all comes down to resources. It's a little bit like the chipper program, which you were asking about, Alice. There were some bumps in the road over the last couple of years with COVID and convicts and all kinds of obstacles. And the wait time went up to 3 or 4 months. Now it's back down to 3 or 4 weeks, which is quite manageable. I don't think we could duplicate the chipper program, and I really wouldn't want to try. We really don't use, what are convicts, the wrong word, but the inmates who are available to work. And I've worked with them in the past. They're wonderful men and women that get things done, built a lot of things in Auburn with them. But for a regular program that you're going to depend on for your life, I would rather have you take a look at your budget and say, we've talked about everything but fire protection in this budget. I know you spent a ton on fire, police, fire, and so forth and so on, but what about these items? You know, where's the money coming from for these items? And I would like you to, if I was sitting in your place, I wouldn't put another dollar towards paving streets until I could go home at night and knowing we'd done everything we possibly could to save Auburn from a wildfire. I would spend the $800,000 to $1 million you do on paving streets for the next 5 years on these items. I'd help homeowners who needed help. I'd organize an inspection program to the nth degree. I like Dave's idea of having a statistical report. Each home would be rated on a 0 to 100. And then you could add up all the homes and you know the city was at a 45. The next year it was at a 55. And maybe eventually you get to 75. That would tell you how prepared you are, because you would have thought about what's important on those homes and whether it's been done. And you'd have it measured with the program that Dave's trying to implement. The statistical side of it's very important, because right now, if I asked you, how prepared are we for wildfire? I couldn't answer that question. I don't think anybody could. I doubt it. Well, Dave could probably put a number against it, but he'd probably scratch his head. Boy, I don't hope they're not going to go downtown and bet on this, because, you know, it's a pretty rough number. Most of the people in Auburn haven't met the challenge yet. And so it's going to be education and education and education, and then hand-holding and hand-holding and hand-holding. And hopefully some money would make it available to take down the giant neighborhood tree that's going to cost $2,000 to get on the ground. It's a real fire hazard. So prioritize, spend some of your money. I mean, prioritize it with everything else you're doing. And then spend some of your money on this for the next 5 years. That's what I'd do if I were sitting in your chair. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Bob. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the city on this matter? Okay, then Councilwoman Dowden Cavillo.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I agree that, you know, for us, it would be important to take this list and to maybe have a study session so that we can go into more detail about it and really prioritize it, you know, in terms of the budget. We've just adopted our budget, obviously, going forward for the next year, but to talk about what's most important to us as a city council for our constituents. So I do support that. There were a couple little things in here that I thought this is really the best opportunity to discuss this. I appreciate the suggestion about establishing a relationship with Union Pacific Railroad. This is something that I've been working on, oh my gosh, since I got back on the council 2 years ago. I do have a contact that works for as a local government liaison with Union Pacific. Tony Ambrogi and I have been going back and forth and trying to work with them to get some clearing. Right now, you know, the railroad owns 245 acres in the city of Auburn, and 8 of those acres have been cleared by the railroad to date. And it has been just a very piecemeal process where, you know, I actually met with my contact. We were able to get someone on board. They did a little bit of work, but then it's not really the local contact, it's headquarters. It's Omaha, Nebraska. They don't understand. It's not the California folks. They get it. And I really think that if we're going to make any headway there, we really need to think globally. And I think that we need to actually organize a small group and go to Omaha and speak to them in addition, you know, along with the California representative, because they don't understand the significance of the fire risk. They're in a different arena. And they have issues, homelessness, they have transportation issues. There's a million things that they're focused on. But I think that city of Auburn, we're a tiny little community, but we have the opportunity to do something really big here. and maybe, statewide. So I really would like to see us do more in that particular arena and to think about a meeting, like I said, with them to talk about what kind of, let's use Auburn as an opportunity as a pilot for them, for California, for Northern California, for what can happen. Because right now it just doesn't work. It's like, there's a little bit of clearing, they stop, then, Tony gives me an email, then I have to go back to Francisco and say, here's the deal. Okay, then they get into their contractor, we meet with them, and it's so incredibly time consuming for staff. And it's just piecemeal, very small little increments. And we really need to take a more global approach. And so I've spoken with our city manager about this. And I think that there are some great opportunities here. Again, just kind of putting that out there. I think we really do need to think globally there. And I also think it's important to really establish that partnership with the United Auburn Indian community as well, because they are a large property owner with, that needs for property that needs to be cleared. They've stepped up and they've done a great job on their parcel next to Auburn Folsom, and truly appreciate that. I'm not being critical at all of their efforts, but I think that it would behoove us to have an ongoing working relationship with them and discussing these kinds of things on a regular basis. So how we can work together to address some of those issues. I think that too, the city of Auburn needs to do more. And when I talk about globally, there's a trip cap to cap every year. And the Sacramento Metro Chamber puts this together, and they establish policies on issues that are important to the region. And fire prevention is important to our entire region. It's not just Auburn or Placer County. Sacramento County has issues too with the American River Parkway. And I think we need to elevate this to them. And let's have a policy committee, or even a sub policy committee or what have you, so that when they go to DC, and I think that we should be there too, we can meet with folks so to ensure that they understand our BOR is our neighbor. They're not in the business of fire management or fire prevention. We know that. And so again, we're grateful when we get a little bit, okay, 500 acres are committed for shaded field break or what have you. But I really think that we need to stand up and we need to be loud, and we need to really work with our regional partners to the best of our ability to make sure that people hear us and hear other communities like Auburn. We don't want to be another community that's been completely flattened by fire. And we need our partners, our landowner partners, to step up and help us. And if we can get them to do that, that means there are more monies to do some of these other things that are very important, the home hardening, the educating, all those kinds of things. If we can get other folks to step up and to do what they should be doing. So I really, like I said, I think that there is the opportunity for some big work. And I'm happy, to support that to the best of my ability with my contacts, legislative and, state, federal contacts. But I just think it's something that we need to step up and do. We need to look at this globally, and it's just something we haven't quite done.
And I would be very supportive of that. I think that lighting a fire under these other entities is something that we need to do. And I think that comes across in this report. And I appreciate your passion. And I appreciate the fact that there is a lot of opportunity for other entities to help us out. And I do have to disagree somewhat with Mr. Snyder. Our Firewise community has very many interested folks who want to help and want to branch out. And I've been to Aeolia's, maybe that must be yours or someone's, and they had parties and all kinds of people out there. They're trying to pass the word. But yes, I think we should reach out. We have opportunities here, and I think you are right. I think it would be a very good for us to be the trendsetter here in terms of trying to facilitate and educate. You're very right and correct in that Omaha doesn't have the need we do. And so they don't understand.
And they don't understand. The other entity is really getting Cal Cities involved. I am on the board of directors for Sacramento Valley Division. So, I certainly intend to continue my discussions on that effort too, because Cal Cities is a huge entity. They carry a lot of weight too from the state's perspective. So I think that there are lots of opportunities for us. We just need to step up and to work towards those. And again, I'm happy. I know Daniel is an expert. dealing with the legislature and some of those kinds of relationships is really something that I've also done quite a bit of as well. So.
Yes, thank you. Is there anyone else on city council that has some comments?
Thank
Councilman
you, Madam
Berlant?
Mayor. I appreciate the comments that my colleague said. I think that Union Pacific, the Bureau of Reclamation are definitely two major landowners in the proximity of Auburn that need to continue work. I think we need to acknowledge that the Bureau of Reclamation has goats currently doing some maintenance work on the shaded fuel break. And so the chief, myself, and John have spent a lot of time trying to get the local folks with the small budget that they have to do everything that they can. But I think you're completely right, is that it's not our local contacts that are the struggle. It is, these larger federal entities or others. A couple things I want to say. I hope that at the end of this discussion that we do direct staff to come back to us. I would ask I think the direction Councilwoman Downing Calvillo that at least I heard about having a study session. I would like that we direct city staff to prioritize it and then come back to us with their priorities, specifically the fire department and our community risk reduction manager. But I think to the mayor's point about, hiring just here recently or about to somebody who writes grants is a game changer. Like Bob said, Bob, you have been a bulldog on this issue for the 8 years that I've been on the council. And the progress that we've made has been huge, but it's not enough. And I will tell you as a person, and there may be others, that's been in almost every city in California that has burned to the ground within 24, 48 hours. I have talked to those folks, and we do not want to be one of them.
No.
We do not want to be, even a small subset of what those communities have to go through emotionally, physically. All of that stuff is unacceptable, but it costs money, right? If it didn't cost money, we would already be in a better place. But I think we need to prioritize what we have staffing for. As I mentioned, we are in a better spot. We made some, we as a council, we as a city have made a huge investment in our firefighters. And I want to acknowledge them because they will be the front lines when a fire does occur to help try to keep it out of the city. But in addition to their hard work, the chief is right that it is going to be a structure to structure issue. That's what happened in Paradise. That's what happened in Santa Rosa. All these major cities burned because one home caught on fire and then it spread to the next, and they're spreading faster than firefighters are even able to battle the fire. And in many of those cities that I mentioned, the fire department's not able to battle the fire. They're just rescuing people. And that's going to be their number one priority, is just getting our elderly neighbors who we may not have thought of yet out of their home safely. So we need to prioritize these 23 items. I think there are some low-hanging fruit on the list. I think there are some items that are already in our WUI strategic plan. I'd like to see the chief come back with an update to that, and then allow us to have that discussion of what additional resources need to occur. I just happen to know somebody who runs the state's grant program, and I will tell you, the state has a significant investment in those grants. While the legislature failed to take action to fund that program, and they've kicked that to September, there is going to hopefully be money in the tune of 120 million or so. I'll mention the Fire Safe Council. Frank sits on that. Bob sits on it. Myself. I know there are others that are watching, have worked tirelessly with this chief to try to apply for those grants and have not been competitive yet, but we have to keep trying. And hopefully with a grant writer, that will help. But when I got on the city council, actually when Councilmember Spokley and I think one of our very first meetings was making a decision on what to do with the firefighters that we had hired through grant funding. And the city was able to, for many, many years, continue its fire protection staffing that it needed using federal grants. It's not sustainable. However, we need to take advantage of the money that's available. Let's kickstart some of these programs. There are a lot of programs the chief mentioned. Hopefully this is a good teaser for that town hall, because a lot is going into the space of training defensible space inspectors, assessors, nonprofit groups. I won't argue with you on the point about Firewise communities, and I'm so glad to hear that yours is motivated. But I will tell you, being on the Fire Safe Council, it is the same half a dozen people that are on those Firewise committees, that are at the Fire Safe Council, that are here in this chamber, that sat on this committee. The list goes on. And so it's great that there are new blood, and that's what we need to continue to do. But I think to the point that was made, I think by Steve, and I know the chief, is that Firewise is an educational designation. And yes, it motivates neighbors and hopefully get other people, motivated to do more, but it's not a validation that mitigation occurred. It's not an actual tool to get neighbors who are stubborn, don't have the financial ability to get that work done. And so I think there's some plenty of work that we need to do to really make sure that we are inspecting and enforcing the ordinances that have been on the books before any of us were on this current council. And so we just need to make sure that the tools are available, the staffing tools to actually enforce those items. The last thing I just want to quickly mention before I ask that we give direction is you may not be familiar, but CAL FIRE was recently charged with surveying every subdivision within the state of California that has 30 or more homes with only one way in and one way out. 2 of those are within the city of Auburn. And so CAL FIRE battalion chiefs came out to the city, specifically the Olive Orchard neighborhood and Roby Point, were surveyed by CAL FIRE, and the fire city may have been with them as well. But they made a list of recommendations that are available to us of things that we can do. And many of these recommendations are in the report that the ad hoc group did, but many of them are not. Here's an example, having a road or an emergency access road that has a locked gate, unlocking that gate during a red flag warning, restricting parking along the side of narrow roads during red flag warning. So I think that in the direction that we give to our staff tonight, I would hope that we set a time frame. We set it for the committee, and yes, we charged the committee with a lot, and granted, you did a lot. There's still a lot left to be done with the funding piece, but I would ask that we set a date like 60 days for city staff to get it back on the books, and maybe it's a special meeting, so it's a study session for us. I think that's a great idea.
I think that's what
so we can give it the time and attention it needs. But I would ask that we look at not only the 23 items that are within our ad hoc group's report, but also let's pull up some of those other programs that the chief mentioned that CAL FIRE around us, and this subdivision review survey that was recently done on 2 of our neighborhoods. Let's look at those things too and see what we can do with the current staff we have now and prioritize. So again, I'll quickly just summarize. I would ask that we direct staff to come back within 60 days with a prioritization of the ad hoc's recommendations, and that 60 days be a special session for us to, with nothing else on the agenda, just be able to focus on that. And then for us to, take the weight of the problem and start moving forward with it. Thank you,
I'd
Madam Mayor.
kind of like to hear from the police chief. This is kind of peak fire season. I don't know, 60 days practical? That would be my only,
Do you mean the
thought.
police or the fire?
excuse me, fire chief.
While he
But-
comes up, I'll just
But
say
he
the
can-
reason
he
I
can
only
think about it,
Yeah, the only reason I said 60 days was we gave the committee 180 days.
They're
And
not fighting fires.
I get that. Are you saying they need more time?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I
Or
thought you were
he
going
may,
to go
I don't-
less.
I don't know. No, I'm saying more time. But you can wait, hold off. Other comments.
Come up to the front seat.
We're going to ask you anyways.
I always love following my colleague, Councilman Berlant, on fire matters with public comment like this. So I agree with everything that Daniel just said. I agree with what Councilman Dowden Calvillo also mentioned. The one thing that I want to just reiterate, because I talk about it whenever we're talking about fire-related enforcement and the like, is just that enforcement. You can do everything in your power to harden your parcel, harden your home, to have your neighbor on the other side of the fence not do anything, and you're at risk still because they're not doing anything on the other side of the fence. So it's part of the report. So I appreciate that. And again, thank you, Steve, to you and all the committee members for the hard work you put into this. I think with our community risk reduction manager, we have an opportunity now to maybe enforce a little more aggressively for some of these delinquent property owners and delinquent homeowners. It's astounding to me. You can drive around their neighborhoods and you can see weeds up to here, and it's the same houses. We see them every year over and over. I'm sure the fire department knows exactly who these people are. Our risk reduction manager, I'm sure we'll get to know them on a first name basis. So great report. I don't want to reiterate what everybody said. I do like the idea, though, that's mentioned in the report to focus on some new ordinances, new code to help provide a little teeth to our staff so that we can enforce these regulations and kind of push the protection that we need in our neighborhoods. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So first off, I'd like to just say thank you to all of our fire and police officers and our I feel very grateful to be a city our size and to have our own police force and to have our own firefighters, because our level of service is higher than we would be getting with CAL FIRE or with Placer County Sheriffs. It's just obvious that that's the case, and not just with fire danger, but also with our medical response and other things that we have going on in the community. So I just want to emphasize how important it is that we do have those folks that know the members of our community, can provide that level of service that we all really value, because if there is something that happens, I would hate to say, oh, well, it was cheaper for us not to do that. So I just want to say that I really value that. And I think that's really important, first off. I definitely agree with all the many comments that were said. I think there's some very valid points. I don't have a lot to add, except for I think that there's a little bit of out of the box thinking that maybe we could do, stealing from things that aren't fire. So I work in the area of energy efficiency and solar and all that kind of fun stuff, where people are trying to do things to their home. And there's a lot of interesting ways you can do rebate programs. You can do low interest loans. You can do programs specifically just for low income people. There's ways that you can have members of the community donate money to a fund just to use for those people who can't afford to fix up their homes. There's things that we can do, I think, as a community to kind of work together to allocate funds or to help people who can't afford. Because I think that there's some folks who are just not interested in fixing up their houses. And there's some folks that just can't afford or don't have the resources or don't have the ability to upgrade their homes. And so I think we need to kind of look and see on a case by case basis where that gap is that we need to fill and where those pain points are for our community, so we can help to work as a community to move everyone in the right direction, rather than leaving some folks behind and just getting mad at them or giving them notices that they're not complying. Because I think that maybe there are some, but I think there's a good portion that are not doing it because they don't want to, but just because they can't for various reasons. So I think there's an opportunity for us as a city to really work towards figuring out some of those solutions to those problems and providing those opportunities for us to work together as a community to help those people in need. And so that's the piece that I think that I would really like to figure out and see.
Thank you so much. So,
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to echo, I appreciate that you raised the issue of local control, and that is very important to me as well. I know I was talking about the national stage and so forth, but retaining that local control with police and fire for the city of Auburn is also very important to me. And I wanted to make sure I went on the record to say that I would absolutely want to retain that authority here. So
you're on record.
Yep, I'm on record.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam
So again, I want to thank the committee members. They met every Wednesday for several months and did a wonderful job. We will utilize and look and certainly prioritize what is on the document. So again, thank you. The committee members that aren't here, it is a shame that we're in the middle of vacation, and I'm sure many more probably would have come. So I think the outcome of this is that we will have the chief and his staff prioritize the document here such that we can certainly come back to us and we can assess through either a work session or a city council meeting at some point. The question is timing. This is peak fire season. I'm sure you're all very busy. I'm not sure you want to set a short time, a longer time, if you want to talk with the city manager, but certainly we want to have this come back to us sooner than later, if possible. So if you want to think about it or come back
or maybe we could even just say, no more than 3 months.
I'm sorry, I feel very strongly that we set a date. There have been a lot of things. Let's talk about One Way to Lincoln Way. Let's talk about the improvements to our downtown business districts that keeps getting pushed off.
Yeah,
we have to set a time.
I think we say it within 90 days. Would that be fair? If we say 60 days because of the fire and so forth, I
think the chief
wants to say something.
But I think we need to have a time frame so it comes back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Berlant made a recommendation that we come back in 60 days with prioritization. So what I wanted to say to this group is let's adhere to that. And what I would say is the caveat that if for some reason that we have some anomaly that occurs that we just can't get it all together, we would come back to you and ask for a little bit of an extension. But let's stay to that because I think that's a reasonable expectation. And then we'll move that into a study session as you described and be able to provide all of the talking points and all of the information that you need to be able to make solid decisions with those 23 points.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So that's all the direction that we need then. So thank you. You have that, city manager?
Yeah, sounds great. We'll bring it back no later than the week of September 19th.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you again, everyone. Appreciate your energy and effort and on this very important topic here. So we'll go on to item number 11, which is discretionary funding process. That'll be
All right.
city manager.
It will. Let me. Lost my place in all my notes. All right, got it. Mayor and council, as part of the overall budget process, we had quite a bit of discussion regarding discretionary revenues and maybe the establishment of an overall process for how we might move forward, not only with coming up with a prioritization, but an overall grant process. Really, what staff has brought to you is a 7-part process that we would go through as far as how we would go in the distribution of funds. And in many ways, I think probably one of the best ways that I've heard it described is the discretionary revenue represents probably the bigger fish of the folks that we support. The item right after this is going to involve talking about the Economic Development Commission's recommendations, where they will look towards some of the smaller events and direct assistance for businesses. In the case of the discretionary revenue, there are some large organizations that we work with within the community that our ability to collaborate with them would fall directly into that. The 7 parts of the program are really simple: establishing an overall schedule, having an application. I put together a draft of a grant application in here. The idea that we would look at organizations for both current and prior funding aspects. One of the things that I haven't included, and this is something that would need to come back to the council, is establishing some criteria, maybe some areas as far as overall priorities for this year. I can tell you that for this year, the next 12 months, this is going to happen twice. We will bring it back sooner than later to the council with the discretionary monies that you've already allocated, but we'll also bring it back in the spring. We are in the middle of a 2-year spending program of 2 different fiscal years. We'll bring it back in the spring, and we'll look towards the idea of programming that. That'll help anybody that we're partnering with to be able to plan on the funding as they move forward. The idea of funding limits, I think it's important that overall, one of the things we'll need to do is be able to set expectations. In this case, the council has come in with some funding ideas. You added $20,000 into the staff recommendation, but the idea that we would establish both a high and a low of what the council is looking for, getting reporting back, and obviously the idea of city recognition in the overall programs. Staff is asking tonight for a couple of things. Number one, input. I've given you a draft. Is there anything that we're missing in here? I get that the idea of the criteria is not there. We would do this very similar to the way that any type of governmental agency is doing things. The idea that we would identify some priorities that the council might have. We would release this out. My recommendation is that based on the funding criteria, that the city council direct staff to be the ones who do the first cut on everything. That's the way that most of the grants do. And we would bring those things back to the council based on an evaluation, based on the criteria and what was submitted with each one of the organizations. One of the best things that I think granting agencies do is they do due diligence. It's not just like hitting the lotto when you get a grant from a government agency. It's the idea that you've worked with the staff, They put your feet to the fire. They make you show that you can actually do what you're going to do with that. Hence, having the staff kind of vet a lot of the things and then bring it back. But like I mentioned, I see this as two things. Is the council, I think, really clearly stated in the budget process. It's the idea that some of the organizations, there is a certain quid pro quo, the ability for the organizations to deliver on various things. We talked about economic benefits. We talked about community benefits. Those are some things that we can elicit within the context of the criteria that we send out as far as the application. We'll do that as part of the evaluation. And then that's the way we'll bring it back. So with that, I'd like to take any input from the council. What I will tell you is that from the input that I get tonight, we'll bring it back within the next couple of council meetings, and we will get the show on the road as far as this first wave for this fiscal year.
So what I hear you saying then is that you want input, and then it'll be 2 more weeks, possibly 4 more weeks, and then it'll go out before they can apply. And then is there a time limit as far as the, the consideration of the grant?
Here's what I'll tonight after the last discussion, I've got a couple of other priorities that we're going to move forward on some things. But I'm fine with that. If the council wants to give me some input, I'll bring the framework back to the council at the next council meeting. It's already on the computer right now for me to tweak and bring a couple of things forward. We would then have an advertising period. So the reality is that this money is going to go out the door sometime, I would say in the fall, based on everything that we would do. So tonight I would like direction and input. I can turn this thing around pretty quick.
Okay, but my other question was, once an applicant applies, how long is the process?
No, I'll bring the time frame on that. Usually in really good grant processes, there's a due date, there's a review date, there's an award date.
Okay.
And I can tell you that we'd probably bring the award date probably back sometime in September.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions?
We had an issue before that we were kind of talking about with applicants not knowing which committee to go to. And I'm imagining this kind of getting in the mix of, does it go to this? Does it go to the Economic Development Commission? Does it go to the Arts? Does it go? So how are we making sure that there's that, easy direction of this kind of request goes here and this kind of request goes there?
Like I mentioned, I think probably the delineation on this is going to be larger amounts of money. And I think the part of the criteria that we would have is bigger fish for this part of it. Probably some of the minimum. I don't want to steal the next item's thunder as far as the EDC, but the EDC is going to have a smaller amount of money that they're going to allocate. I can see probably easily in this that probably the funding criteria will go up to $10,000. And
so you're looking for priorities though for this, is that right?
Yeah.
From the council.
And one of the criteria that we've put in here, you can't go to 2 wells on this thing.
Right.
It's the idea that you're going to have to pick the one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important to really differentiate, as Councilwoman Riddell Harris said, between the discretionary funding process and the funding provided by the Economic Development Commission. And I think really that there's 2 different criteria. One is the dollar amount, as we talked about. I envision this being 10K or more, but I also envision it being more than 1 year. I know that we had a request for an ongoing discretionary funding so that entities could be more secure in their budget building process and so forth. And I'm not saying it has to be in perpetuity, but maybe, we've now adopted this 2-year budget. So maybe the discretionary funding could be for a 2-year. So it's a 2-year request that, there's a discussion of how the monies would be used each year. But that's kind of how I see it. These are the bigger the bigger bangs for your buck, again, the State Theater, those kinds of organizations that are coming forward with specific, requests and are able to really demonstrate that economic, benefit to the community and so forth. But that's kind of how I see it. It's that 10K or more, and then maybe make it a multi-year award as well, with the caveat, of course, that it's as long as we have funding, because the minute we don't have funding.
So you're thinking just like larger organizations versus like individual businesses asking for things. And
On the discretionary, yes, I think that, and we'll talk about it in the next thing, but I think that the Economic Development Committee has really done a great job, sorting out the different pots of monies and how they go to the businesses, for example, and so forth. So this discretionary funding, because right now the discretionary funding that we have is for cable access television and for the library. And that really, there's a wide community benefit for those two entities. And of course, those are ongoing, but we had a JPA with the library for the purposes of funding that. And then, Auburn Community Foundation, we've been funding for decades now. And really, they are providing a specific service to us. Maybe not as great as it was initially before we had the, really wide use of internet and so forth. But there certainly is that partnership. So that's kind of what I see. And I'd like to see that kind of in the program when you bring that back, really. So it's very clear to organizations that are coming to us asking for funds, that the discretionary funds are really meant to be that bigger bang, that bigger ask. And then, that they have the ability to ask it for, at least 2 years.
Are you bigger ask 10,000 or more?
Yeah, 10K or more, really, because if it's under that, I think Economic Development Commission has a nice program, I'm just going to throw this out there, but a perfect example for me on this discretionary funding is the 4th of July celebration that the chamber does. The city partners on that. I don't know how much we contributed financially, 5,000, but then I don't know what our in-kind was, probably several thousand on in-kind as well, as far as staffing and overtime and things of that nature. But that is a service to the community that has a huge benefit, a multi-pronged benefit. And something like that is, if that were a kind of a request that would come forward for discretionary, I could see that as a discretionary ask, and it would be not just 10K, but I mean, it would be the financial and the in-kind could total it, that 10,000. Of course, the State Theater, but I'm just saying when we talk about some of these other things. So.
Councilman Berlin?
Yeah, I'll echo what my two colleagues just said. I too agree that at least my vision for this was that it's sustainable, because that's what I heard the request initially. I'm okay with it being ongoing, and if we tie a budget number to it, the reserve has to be above 40%. Otherwise, it must come back to council. That way, these organizations that are the larger economic drivers have the knowing going into their budget season that money's available, and that allows them to focus then on fundraising in other areas and not having to come to us, in my words, nickel and dime us for various events. So I do think that it should be sustained. I personally, I think that there needs to be an economic threshold. I don't know what that is. 10,000 people need to, benefit from it. Something that differentiates, I won't use, because if we use an example, they'll get mad at us, but something that differentiates, a small event, a first timer with a sustained community event that brings people into our community and drives our economy, but still relies on funding to be able to do that. And so I think we need to have a separation. I want to circle back though to the question that I heard Councilwoman Riddell Harris ask, but I didn't hear an answer, which is, how do people know where to go for the different grants? I think we don't want to get ahead, but EDC laid it out very well. I think there are 4 or 5 different buckets. How do we make sure that there's one place that if I'm a community organization, I know where to go? And so whether that's the website, whether that is we need to add to this EDC list, this larger line item, whether this is only a one-time, a one-time opportunity, because those big economic organizations are coming every year. We know who they are, right? It's the new ones that are going to get the seed money. And then, if somebody, meets that threshold, we can come back to that discussion. But I guess my 2 cents here is in the examples that have been given so far, the symphony, the library, ACTV, the chamber, the state theater. I don't think we're going to get, once we have that threshold, a lot of new organizations. And if we do, then we just come back to having it, be here. But I want to come back to what do you envision? And maybe that just needs to be something to think about.
Yeah.
Where do people go so that they know they don't need a double dip? Because at least what I kind of heard, or at least what I'm assuming is, how do I know I'm not double dipping? Because I see there's an opportunity here, I see there's an opportunity there. We need to have it in one place. And maybe it's best that it all sits at the EDC, by the way, so that it's clear, but that's just something to think about. Well, I think that's a question that didn't get answered. So yeah, I'd like
you know what? Let me bring that back, because you bring up a very good point, because there are some organizations that I don't think are going to nickel and dime. And those are in many respects the ones that we really would want to go for. So, let me work on that. I think it'll get into the overall criterion for various things, because, there's nothing wrong with the small grants. I will tell you, I love the next item. I think it's very well vetted. It's completely divided out. It's going to allow for big and small. In this case, like I said, I think probably the best comments that I've got on for these funds is bigger fish.
Yeah.
On things and
sustainable.
And sustain the idea of sustaining funding on some things. So to your point, let me think about that a little bit, and I will bring it back within the criteria that we that'll come back at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Councilman Spokely, do you have something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with everything that's been set up here already, John. The selection process is something that I think everybody's going to want to know about, because eventually you're going to say no. And those people who get denied are going to want to know why.
Yep.
So outlining that selection process so it's crystal clear, so everybody understands, we select based on these points or this scale, and you didn't qualify this round. Try again next time. Am I understanding correctly that the 20,000 we had for the symphony, or 10 for symphony, 10 for state theater, and then the 20 additional, that's part of the $40,000 that's mentioned here in this?
In
funding
this
round?
kind of the way the staff's looking at it, we did line item in there for the symphony and in the library. So we're probably number one of the things that we'll ask both for the state theater and for the symphony is they're going to have to bring in an overall program for it that will fit into the same criteria of things.
But it is in the it isn't, they are in the budget for the next year, but we're going to ask them retrospectively to go ahead and fill.
Yes, they're going to have to bring in an overall proposal. In this, the consistency is going to be the establishment of a quid pro quo. You're going to do this as part of the money. It'll represent kind of our contract of collaboration with them. But for the other organizations that we have, that we will get grants from, going for the additional, some things as an example for both the state theater and the symphony, if they want this to be ongoing, they're going to have to include those types of things within their overall submittal. For any organization that wants to have ongoing funding, they will have to take a multi-year approach. It's not like this is any just one and done type of thing and you get it in perpetuity. So I think there's going to need to be a way for it to come back. But I think as far as an overall criteria, to your point, we will have to put down some type of a scoring criteria that is not going to be arbitrary. And ultimately, I think some of the factors, community benefit, economic benefit, prospects for sustainability. The one thing about Auburn, we've got really good organizations here. And one of the things that they need to do is bring it. They're going to have to bring in a really good proposal if they want something to be on a long-term basis. And I only say this because I know they can do it. They need to bring in an overall sustainability model that would carry them beyond just a one and done type of grant application. So we'll include that in the overall criteria and scoring.
So I believe that a lot of these sponsoring opportunities used to come directly through the city manager's budget, like the fireworks, for example.
Yep.
We didn't get asked about that. That just happened. And I believe the State of the Community Dinner, we just sponsor that every year. It just happens. So are all of those going to be a part of this new grant process? All of
No,
those?
You know, the one thing the city does a very good job of supporting some of the community events.
I
The
agree.
fireworks,
I agree.
I can tell you, I'm not going to be the guy that says no to the fireworks.
I'm not suggesting that you do that. For the
So
record.
there are some
Accurate.
things that have been continuous and ongoing. And there are a couple of those things, but we certainly, in providing an accounting for all those types of things, I think we'll get into the perspective of funding on. So we're going to need to do an accounting from a staff standpoint of some of the things. Councilmember Riddell Harris brought up the fact that it's not, it's not just the $5,000, but there's also a lot of other things. There's a lot of in-kind stuff that the city does. So getting a handle on a lot of those things will only be fair to the other organizations. So there's some homework to be done.
I think what we're going to find with this transparency, which I really appreciate the fact that now it's kind of transparent, there's going to be a lot of our really solid organizations and nonprofits in our town coming before us asking for monies. So get ready for it. They're going to come.
I don't doubt that.
Well, that's why we need a good process.
Yeah.
So Councilman Berlant, then I'll open it up to the public.
I thought of one additional question that I'm a little confused at, and maybe it's just old language. Why is ACTV and the library part of this discretionary dollars? I heard the comment that, we're part of this JPA or other some, formal, agreement on the library. That's not discretionary then. And the same thing with ACTV, they're really providing a service to the community. So I guess I just throw out there, you don't have to answer that question, but I guess I want to differentiate, or I'd like to see when you come back to us, we differentiate events that go to EDC with these larger economic driving organizations that we're talking about here versus these other types of ACTV and library, which are not economic drivers, they're community benefit. So I want to, in my mind, I think come back to, break out these differences because we shouldn't. ACTV, you guys do a great job, but they're not a state theater or a symphony. They're not an organization. They're also not putting on special events. And again, differentiate these three, I think would be helpful.
Yes, I agree. So anyone from the public like to comment?
Mayor Mara, I have a public comment on Zoom.
And Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Go ahead.
Cheryl, it's your turn whenever you're ready.
That must be Cheryl's view right now.
I'm trying to, sorry, guys. Hi, good afternoon, good evening.
We can't hear you.
So you're muted.
You can't hear me. I'm unmuted. I don't know why. Oh, no.
You're unmuted, but your audio is not working.
Great. I don't know what to do about that.
Maybe she can fix it and we'll have.
Can you hear me
Councilwoman Riddell
now?
Harris. Go ahead.
Turn on the microphone though. So I really, like everyone else, am very supportive of these community groups. I'm worried about when this starts to get more popular. And so right now we have this $40,000 and Daniel had his hand up with probably a whole hand, and we could probably come up with more that maybe would want to qualify for this. If it's ongoing funding, then we can't really take some out and put some more in if it's ongoing. So are we going to keep adding and adding and adding, or are we going to make it so that some after a few years rotate out? Are we going to, every time that one new one that we think is worthy, come back and keep adding to the budget? I'm just not quite sure how we're going to keep this manageable versus just continuing to add, because I know there's so many worthy groups that I would hate to say no to them. And
Wasn't it a 2-year max though?
What?
2-year max?
Well, it wasn't 2-year. Everyone says sustainable funding and that they want long-term, ability. But then if you keep adding, that creates a problem. So I'm just trying to figure out.
So I think we were saying also sustainable events too. I mean, events that, or continuous, not just
Well,
one
well,
time?
this came from the State Theater wanting to know that it was going to be in the budget every year, right? And so if we do that for the State Theater and then we add X, Y, Z other community groups, then don't we just keep adding more and more money to the budget? And when do they roll off and how do we make this
I think,
manageable?
I mean, it's a great point, and, but I think that's where, what at least I'm looking for from back to the city manager is
Yep.
having that bar be high. If we're talking about sustainable funding for these organizations that are economic drivers, the bar needs to be high so that we shouldn't be in the boat of having to add more. I think from my perspective, when the request came for the symphony and the state theater, they were here and well represented and it made sense, but we didn't actually open it up to those same level of high bar, high economic driving organizations.
Yeah. You know, one of the things about getting ongoing and sustainable funding is based on performance. And I think we'll need to specify certain types of performance criteria. I'll give you a really good example, was working with the Western States Museum folks. You know, I set a pretty high bar that you've got to figure out how you're going to do these things. And some people will get to the level of what you're asking them. Now, in this case, though, it's where the staff becomes less popular. But I think that we are going to put a funding limit on the overall allocation. Right now, if you take in all the money, right now we're at probably about $250,000 almost that the city is funding into various organizations on some things, which doesn't include in kind that we're providing. So I think getting an accounting for that and absolutely putting a limit on it.
I guess, can we also make sure that we're assessing on a regular basis need? Because I think that going back to them, and I mean, if they've done the projects that they were planning on doing for the next 4 or 5 years, and there's not another big project that needs to get done, I think we should just make sure that we're checking back in to make sure that that need is still as significant as maybe some other needs for some other community groups.
One of the questions that we are asking in there is how, if they're proposing an overall program, they need to explain how they're going to make it self-sustaining.
Okay.
So in so many ways, this helps us get some things off of the ground. Obviously, the city is going to fund things that are ongoing that we're like, yes, we're going to keep on putting electricity in that car, right? But there is a chance that they are going to have to, people will have to say, this is our proposal. This is how it's going to eventually be self-sustaining.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think, do you have enough direction?
I think we still have public comment, though.
No, I asked. There's
Oh,
no
we-
one. from
We
the
do,
public?
because I know that,
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Up
2 people that
up-
were, and I know.
on the video, Miss
Cheryl,
Mackey?
can you try again? We believe we have the volume fixed.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
I might have a way around this.
Somebody's talking.
I can hear.
Can you hear me?
Cheryl, her lips aren't moving. What?
Oh, it's the delay from us. It's our delay.
Darn it. Can you hear me? Darn it.
What if we had? What if we have our call in on a cell phone, and just put it on the speakerphone? Can we do that?
Can you call?
Cheryl, you can call in if
Yes.
you'd like.
Should I-
Call the City Hall with the extension 102.
Okay, all right.
Did you say you have
Which is
another?
823-4211, which I'm sure you
Yeah, I
already
know that.
Want me to call her?
She's calling. This is the phone.
Is there another a speaker? I mean, oh, I thought you said there was.
I thought there were 2. I thought.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Here we are in 2022. Okay, I just wanted to make a couple of comments and ask a question. I think Matt pretty much clarified it for me, though. I think John said that we were still going to get the funding for the State Theater and the Symphony this year. We just had to fill out the form and do all the criteria that that you're requesting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And something I want to clarify is that when the Economic Development Commission was formed, it was formed merely to fund first-time events or events that were trying to get a start. And then they would fund them maybe twice, but very seldom 3 times. So the state theater and organizations like ours don't really fit in that criteria with the economic development. I mean, if we have an event, we come to them, but it's really, I mean, it might not be the first time we've had that event. So it was kind of there's a disconnect there, whether or not we should have applied with economic development. And that's why I came to the council for a budget item. And then also, I absolutely agree with Daniel. There should be an economic threshold. When we reach a point where we're laying people off or we don't have enough money for budget items that are necessary, we should not be funding other programs in the city. Discretionary funding, that's what discretionary funding means. That's your discretion, and that we should be worrying about the basics of the budget, and that is, you know, roads, sewer, and so on. And I also think what you need to do, John, is this form that we have to fill out is more like we're asking for a one-time or a grant for an event. I think it has to be a little bit more detailed. I also think it should ask for the financial viability of the organization and maybe have us submit a budget to you, because we're asking for a lot of money. So maybe you might want to see how feasible it is to give an organization these funds by looking at their budget documents. That's just my opinion. Anybody have a question of me?
Well taken. Thank you. I agree with that. But I hate to have an echo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other comment? Then I think you got that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Those were City Council. I appreciate the input and thoughtfulness of it. And we'll go on to the next one, which is the Auburn Economic Development Commission to approve a funding request policy. Jonathan?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Jonathan Wright, Economic and Planning Manager for the moment. The ink has not been laid upon the paper, so we're still here. If you'll recall, in October 11th of 2021, the City Council directed staff to work on a policy for the EDC, or the Economic Development Commission, on funding. That policy has been worked on over the last 9 months. You can tell I started this a while ago because it said 7. Sorry about the typo. But it was in fact 9 months of development with the EDC. They spent a lot of time chewing on this document. You can tell that there's a lot of thought into this document. And it was really focused on the original resolution that was passed by the City Council in June of 2015. Which is attached at the back of your council packet here. And it really lays out the roles and responsibilities of the Economic Development Commission. I believe that by implementing these grants that we are meeting, at least in part, all of those goals. However, they are very adhered to a few directly, and I'm going to read those real quick. One of them is create funding and in-kind requests from Chamber of Commerce, the city business associations, and other businesses and nonprofit associations. To create funding and in-kind requests for special events, to facilitate the creation of jobs in the city of Auburn in both existing and new businesses, and to champion assistance to new and existing businesses. From these goals, the EDC created a structure. That structure was essentially focused on how they're going to carry out the funding for these, the timing for it, and different grant categories, which if you look at the breadth of the goals there, you can't just say it's for events. I mean, it really talks about helping businesses working with new businesses, as well as funding events, as well as community organizations. So looking at those three basic topics, the program was actually fleshed out into 3 different grant funding programs. Now, the first one looks very familiar, the event sponsorship. We never had criteria for it before. They came and asked, and he said, okay, it sounds like a great project. This actually provides some type of structure. It provides a time frame so that it's not just as things occur, but it'll be notified. They'll have the opportunity to come in with everybody else. It'll be a competitive process. And it does allow for some flexibility. There was the discussion of, can you do it if you've already had the grant funding? Well, you can, but if you look at the grant funding syllabus at the back there, you'll see that you get ranked lower. I mean, that's just how it works. The more times you come back to the well for funding, the lower your scoring, so that those other higher, newer projects get the chance to be there. And of course, everything's based on the amount of funding that the EDC actually has to provide. The next one's very exciting. This is true economic development. And I like to put it's a no holds barred approach to economic development, which it truly is. So if you look at the criteria in there, it's not just limited to facades. It's actually limited to business enhancement, whatever we can do to try to help people based off the criteria of job creation or job retention and or business creation and or business development and or retention. So all those things that we're truly working to do here, they're not huge funding amounts. They're really designed for the mom and pops and the startup businesses to get help when they need it most, getting going, or even for some of those older businesses that have been here for a while but need some help with some facade improvements or some signage, some things that really would help their business. And that's why it's called the Business Improvement Grant. And then last was a chance to partner through the Community Enhancement Grant. And that's really taking dollars and putting them towards projects. So we all know how this works in government. We have projects that members from the Arts Commission or let's say Caltrans, the Lions Club, somebody's trying to do something in a public park, and it's a great, it has an economic component to it. But of course, they're fundraising, they're trying to get this thing put together. This is an opportunity for them to come and we can partner with them on one of those types of projects. So I just put out a couple of examples in there about historic markers, streetscape enhancements, recreational facilities, and so forth. I mean, we're the endurance capital, and while the endurance capital is doing their own thing, streetscapes, it includes, bike parking, is economic development. So that's how those things could kind of fold together. So so in June 14th, 2022, at the regular scheduled meeting, after many meetings and much discussion on this, this policy was approved, as well as the supporting documents that are included in there. Now, I want to throw it out because this is a live document. It's a live program. This is a new program. There will be issues. We're going to run in, we're going to have those, oh, we didn't think, that didn't really forgot that might happen. And we're going to work through all those processes. But we had to have a starting place. And you can tell that the EDC put a lot of time and invested a lot of thought into the document that you have there. It addresses the policies of the council as they were provided in 2015 and how they'll be implemented through this policy. It provides timeframes. It provides criteria that can be evaluated so that everybody comes in and gets a fair shake. So I know that we have April Maynard and Christine Eubank from the Economic Development Group. If you want to have me say anything, or
Real quick, I just wanted to say something since I'm on the committee too. I wanted to say thank you to everyone on the committee who worked really hard on this. We went back and forth and really thought through all this. I did want to correct one thing you had talked about. If the Arts Commission wants to do something, we did talk about keeping that separate because we were talking about which goes to where. So it would either be Arts or it would be us. We wouldn't be co-funding anything. But yeah, we just wanted to make it so it was a fair process. We're going to go out probably twice a year, depending on, we're planning to go out sometime in fall and advertise it and make it an open process. And then if we have more money later, we can do a secondary process. We're hoping we spend all of our money right away, but we'll see how it goes. So yeah, everyone's super excited about this, and to have kind of that structure, I think it'll be really good for everyone to kind of understand what we're shooting for with this. So thanks to everyone who helped.
And
real quick, just to tee off on the last agenda item, Councilman Spokley talked about criteria, and we really tried to meet that in this policy to make sure we had defined criteria. And Council Member Riddell Harris also talked about the notice. How are people going to get this out? This is going to be something that's going to be connected to the EDC website, which they have a web page, excuse me, on the city's website. And one of the strategic planning items that I am tasked with is actually creating an economic development web page, which will then be used to provide information for grants, because that's where people go when they're looking for money. So they'll be housed in those two places, as well as we have a lot of great community members that will undoubtedly help us get around.
And I think that if we see something in the community that may need some help, or a business that may need some help, this is something that we can help direct them to, that this is an opportunity. And I think that's helpful too.
This concludes my staff report.
Is marketing included? Is that kind of come under website for businesses that need help with marketing?
So if you look at the policy, it talks about expanding the reach. You have to have a brick and mortar in here.
Yes.
But looking at technology of today, where people find you on your cell phones or find you on your smartphone, whatever, that would be included. I mean, they could apply. Again, the criteria is it'll get people in the door. It'll
Yes.
enhance the business, retain jobs, those items.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments with this? No?
I
Public?
did.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank Jonathan, yourself, as well as the Economic Development Commission. This is a very, very comprehensive document. I think that it's important that we have it, and I really do appreciate having that. And I love the information about what, that you would complete after the event to see how it's been successful to basically drive home the effectiveness. You've got this survey in the back that you do. So I really appreciate that too, because I think it's very important that we connect that dot. It's great to give out the funds, but it's really important to also assess that and how successful were those funds in achieving the goals that they were presented or proposed. Really quick question. Under business improvements, what about sidewalk repair? And we just talked about this. I know we're going to have another council meeting or mayor, but about sidewalk, whether or not it's a jurisdictional, whether or not it's into the city or the business owner, what have you. But I just wonder if you've thought about that right now as a possibility for inclusion under business improvements. It sounds like you probably didn't really think about it. So, I just throw it out there because we were talking about the sidewalk and sidewalk improvement is something that when we talk about facade improvements, that business owners could apply for the funds under the business improvement caveat, for facade improvements. And I just thought, well, what if you had a business that wanted to do some, like, for example, they wanted to do some outdoor dining on front of their sidewalk, and there was some work that needed to be done in order to facilitate that because it wasn't even.
I think that'd take a lot of money.
Well,
Yeah, probably more than what that grant provided, but
But it
actually
could
you
be-
created the perfect nexus. I mean, that would be the nexus for
Yeah.
that type of thing, is that they had to do a few things to do that.
yeah.
I think that would be something that the EDC would entertain.
I
But
think if it's improving the business or creating new, if it's just fixing it, so.
No, I'm thinking, like I
safety
said,
reasons, that's different, but I
No.
like the
Pedestrian.
idea of outdoor dining or something.
that's,
like that.
yeah, and that's really what I'm thinking about. Yes, it's going to be more, but I mean, every little penny helps. And so, if they need to do some leveling or something on that portion or a curb or something, it's just something that I thought about. So.
And
course.
so what, is this available on the city website? How are you getting the word out?
So this will be available under the both the EDC webpage as well as what we'll be working on very shortly with the Economic Development webpage.
We're also lucky enough to have members of most of the business community on the EDC, so I'm sure they'll be sharing that at their meetings.
Well, there's some new businesses in town that have been asking me and they need help. So that would be helpful. So just direct them to the city website or EDC.
Once
So-
we get this on and up, right?
Yeah, once this is approved and we have a meeting tomorrow with the EDC and we'll have obviously an ongoing discussion with it. It'll be up to them to set the time frame. So we would really roll out the media and that at the time where we know when the time frame is going to be for actually sending out grant
Great.
or receiving grant requests.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this matter? Okay. Okay, then I think we can move on. This is informational. Thank you.
Actually, I
No, we
need,
need to have
we do?
Madam Mayor, I'll move the adoption of the Economic Development Commission's funding request policy.
I'll second.
Councilmember Spokley,
Yes.
Berlant.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Moore.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank
Thank you
you.
for your time on
Thank
this.
you. And now we will go to the downtown and Old Town capital planning meetings.
Yeah, Mayor and Council. Staff's put in an overall, just as an information item and also to get any input. We're going to start kicking off the process. The council's funded almost $1 million. Well, exactly $1 million for capital investment in both downtown and Old Town. Staff is starting to work on planning meetings, July 26th for Old Town, the 27th for downtown, to do some open meetings where we go. I've put together a draft agenda just to kind of give an overview of the idea that we're going to talk about capital improvement funding, talk about some previous planning efforts. We have assembled quite a bit of information. Probably for both of these, we'll put together like little mini websites. So I'm not handing out a bunch of paper to everybody. We'll talk about the form-based code. For downtown, we will raise the issue of traffic and pedestrian orientation. For that, we'll talk about the future of outdoor dining. And then we'll talk with folks about how we can really get some good outreach. The idea that we can, through the ARPA funds, we're going to invest almost $1 million. There is opportunity. We want to get input from folks on how this is all going to be used. So with that, I am planning, I've been exchanging emails with the representatives of both Old Town and downtown to try and get some ideas on how we can get the word out on these things. It's going to kind of be a progressive process. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the council or get any other direction.
I have no questions, Madam Mayor.
Yes, so the Old Town Business Association, they're meeting separately. That's my understanding.
Correct.
And how will we get the word out? The Old Town Business Association will get the word out. Downtown will get the word out.
Correct. We'll also be doing mailers to everyone,
Okay.
to the property owners, because obviously get them in the loop, get the information out to the businesses. For downtown, given the fact that we had a room full of residents surrounding downtown, especially about traffic, we will let them know about these meetings so that we committed that to them. So we will do our best to spread the word and to work with all forms of media.
So we're doing it quite quickly, but Councilman Berlant and myself have some conflicts. And so we were hoping to maybe talk with Christina here, who's in the audience, and meet after and give you some dates, some alternate dates, if that's okay. Is that agreeable to you? And Christina, is that okay with you? I see her shaking her head, yes. So, yeah, we're difficult this time of year. So if that's okay, we'll give you some dates after.
Well, I will tell you, for the week of the 25th, we were going to have a council meeting. The 26th, we have planned to do Old Town. 27th, and then the city is hosting the Placer County electeds dinner on the Thursday. So if you want to give one breather, that would be great.
We do, yeah. So
we can do that.
Maybe the week that we don't have a council meeting, that might be a good.
That's next week.
No, that's 2 weeks after the 8th of August, right? That's the meeting we don't have. No,
We don't have a meeting on the 8th. Yeah.
We don't have a meeting on the 8th.
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying we're one meeting less.
Well,
So maybe
you know
that
what
might
we'll
be-
do? We'll try and figure it out after.
Yeah. So I apologize, but so
The 27th
we're
works.
just talking about the 26th for the Old Town.
Correct.
That
And what we're
doesn't
saying is
work
That doesn't work for either of us. So we'd like to work with you and Christine after the meeting to find a new date for the Old Town meeting.
Perfect.
And I think does downtown work for the 27th? Who's
It
ever
works
on
for
that
me.
committee?
Yeah. One of the things I worked on yesterday was starting to come up with the draft mailing to get out to everybody. So the biggie is going to be for downtown.
The
because
only
like I said,
drawback is Christine has to stay through the whole meeting.
John, what time? Were you looking at-
Probably 6-ish
Okay.
when it's
I just wanted to
convenient
put it
for
in my calendar.
folks.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Then we will move on to item number 9. And that is Chief Canan, I believe. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Captain Huey.
Sorry.
Lieutenant, I'm
Sorry,
so
I moved
sorry.
your item.
And that's the Q-HIT Customer Satisfaction Surveys APD. Thank you.
Good evening, Lieutenant Tucker Huey, Auburn Police Department, and change gears up a little bit. Rather than coming and asking for something tonight, I'm just going to tell you about some of the great things we're doing with a piece of technology we already have. So as you already said, it's Q-HIT. So first off, what is that? Well, it's really just a simple text survey that allows us to reach our community. We're proactively soliciting feedback from the community about satisfaction after interactions they have with officers and dispatchers, and it's going directly to their cell phones. So this really boring photo is actually where all the magic happens. So what we need to do is there's certain calls where we actually want feedback and there's others where we probably don't. So obviously the police department has sometimes an adversarial relationship. If we were to solicit our feedback from everybody we arrest for DUI, we probably wouldn't do that great. And the other thing, obviously we deal with some sensitive calls. It would just be tone deaf to send someone that was sexually assaulted a survey and say, hey, take a minute, tell us how we did. So what we do is we go through, we select our various call types and we identified the call types that we think, yeah, this is probably appropriate for a survey. Then utilizing, again, everything keeps falling back on our new CAD system, right? This is another one of those. So our new CAD system allows us to do this. It allows us to identify people that are associated in that call as a reporting party. Obviously, we don't want to send a survey to a suspect that we may or may not have contacted and say, hey, somebody said you did this and we need to talk to you. So this is obviously focused only on the appropriate types of calls and the appropriate types of people. The other, kind of magic behind the scenes is it allows us to kind of freeze that out. So once we have that call, the system will put it in a 6-hour timeout. And so it allows some time to pass, kind of the emotion to fade, and it's a little more relaxed when they receive that. And then also it allows us to make sure we're not sending it at midnight. So it actually times out from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And so we're not sending messages in the middle of the night. So this is actually what the message is. It's a series of texts that go straight to the cell phone. I'm not Chief Canan, but the message would say, this is Chief Canan from the Auburn Police Department, based on your interaction. And then it hits with how satisfied were you with the way the 911 call taker handled your call? And it's a simple 1 to 5 score, and then a text feedback for the 911 caller. And then it goes into the officer, same thing, 1 to 5, how was your service, and their ability to offer feedback. And then closes with the ability to, if you have any additional concerns, and it gives the phone number so they have the ability to reach out to us.
So each one of these arrows is a different text.
Yeah, so the first 2 come together as one, and then each arrow after that.
Do they have the option to opt out before they get all of them?
Yes.
Okay.
So they get the introduction and the how satisfied are you?
Okay.
And then they don't get anything else until they respond. And then as they respond, they continue to get the next message.
Great.
At any point they say, I'm just going to ignore this, it stops right there.
Great, thank you.
So what are we actually getting from this? So we rolled this out on the 25th of March of this year. So far, we've sent out 780 surveys. We've gotten 433 of those back, or about a 55.5% return. So they use the term CPSS, which is Q-HIT Positive Satisfaction Score. Really all that is a rating of a 5 or a 4, with obviously 1 being poor, 5 being exceptional. So anything that's either, good or exceptional, they're counting as a positive score. So year to date, or, from implementation to present, we have a positive satisfaction of 88%, which is great. One of the other things it does is it obviously, as I said before, it's about 6 hours behind, but other than that 6-hour delay, it's pretty much a real-time update, and it breaks it down each week. So we can not only over the length of the program, but week to week, we can track how that score is fluctuating. So this is live data of the actual scores since implementation. We see we fluctuate from a high of 100% satisfaction to, I believe our low was 78.8. Not only just the raw score, it also gives us the volume of what the actual rating was. And then it uses a smart algorithm to try to identify the text, and it'll flag that text as positive, neutral, mixed, or negative. The algorithm is kind of where the technology is not quite there. You know, a lot of times it'll pick up on keywords that it identifies as negative when actuality they're positive. We can go through and kind of look at those and see whether that's accurate or not. But obviously the 1 to 5 rating usually is accurate. There have been a handful of times when someone will say, hey, great work, we appreciate everything you do, and we got a 1 out of 5. It's just, they miss the instructions. So, you know, how do we use this to our benefit? Well, I mean, first of all, it's quality control. So right now, any score of a 1 or a 2 or the low end of the score will trigger an automatic email to the command staff. We can look at the review. We can look at the call for service and determine how do we proceed with this. For the most part, it's been kind of an education tool for our officers. And a lot of times it's simply, maybe we didn't do enough to explain why a decision was made. And so it's educating the caller as well. Obviously, it's an evaluation tool for our employees. So obviously we have the department scores. Each individual officer and call taker also has a score of their own. We have the ability to go in, look at all of their calls, what comments were provided, what was positive, what was negative, as well as just a snapshot of what their Q-hit score is. And kind of as I talked about, this is a huge mentoring and coaching piece for our staff, because even though it looks like 80% of the time we're getting it right, we can always do better and we can always improve. And so this is really a driving force for us to get from 80 to 85 to 90 and keep working our way up. One of the buzzwords in law enforcement is early intervention. Early intervention is usually kind of tied to like the use of force and complaints and that type of thing. We're getting well before that. We're not waiting until we have complaints or we have use of force issues. If we have an officer or dispatcher that's having some type of negative downward trend, we're going to know about that sooner. We're going to know about that when they stop being polite before it becomes an issue, and we can identify that and deal with it. And then again, it's validation that our training, our policies, and our community engagement and education are going the right direction. We have the right focus and they're working. And then another big piece, it's a reminder to our employees that they're appreciated, that they make a difference in their community, and we get that positive feedback. When someone's upset, we're going to get that phone call every time. But when someone's appreciative, those are the phone calls that until now we're going missed. And to be able to give that to the officers and the dispatchers. So this is some of the positive feedback that comes up. We're currently working on a monitor in the police department that will have this that will be pushed out to the officers. So the officers walking down the hallway, the dispatchers walking down the hallway can look at this live feed of all of the positive interactions they've had with the community and how the community sees them. That's it. And at this point, if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Sorry. Are there any questions? Go ahead.
Just real quick, how long have you been running this program?
March
see the date.
25th
March 25th
of this
of
year.
Fantastic. Looks like I actually found a text when I called and somebody crashed their car out in front of my house. It wasn't a bad crash, they were just stuck on a guardrail, but it was a non-emergency call, and that's what Daniel's going to ask you about. Dude, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. We're
That
talking about
particular
that
emergency, was
beforehand.
it Daniel?
So it goes out on 911 calls. It also goes out on non-emergency calls, right?
Yes. And so they use the term 911 call taker as kind of something that someone is going to associate with the person that answers the phone. And it's not necessarily 911. The one limitation, since the technology is obviously, it has to be a cell phone. So if you provide the dispatcher your landline, you're not going to get a text there. It's not going to send. But any call into our dispatch center that results in creating a call for service through the CAD that uses a cell phone will trigger that.
Councilman Berlin?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just have a quick comment. Thank you, guys. I had made the joke earlier that the police department has like a standing space on the agendas these days with really cool technology. But this one in particular, I think is really important to provide you the feedback. But what I really appreciated was that it's not just about the negative feedback, it's also that positive reinforcement. I know the chief and I've had this conversation quite a bit that, you know, the number one complaint that I get about the police department is that there's no follow through or you know, closing out sometimes a call for somebody. And there's, you know, many reasons for that. And so one thing that I worry about a technology like this is sometimes the perception of a call may be very different. And so how do you I guess there's a question. How do you overcome, in my department, we get a lot of people who go to the media that say, I called 911, it took 15 minutes for the fire engine to arrive. When in reality, we pulled a call, it took 30 seconds to dispatch it. It took 3 minutes for them to arrive. But from the perspective of time for that caller, it's very, very different. And so how do you kind of balance some of those emotions and some of those misperceptions, if you will, when it comes to emergencies?
You nailed it. You're obviously tied in the community because that's exactly what we're seeing with Q-Hit. You know, our biggest negative response is typically that I didn't know the outcome. And so that's been a huge portion of the mentoring, and it's that quality control. We've been telling from the beginning, we've been telling our officers, make sure you close the loop, make sure you let the reporting parties, the people involved know what happened. And this is kind of holding them to task on that of, we're going to hear about it if you didn't and they don't know the outcome. So that has been huge for us. And as to the emotions, a lot of time it's simply a matter of education. And this gives us the ability to know that someone's not happy, to reach out with them, to give them a voice, let them talk through their frustrations and offer them that education. If we got it wrong, we're going to admit we got it wrong and we can do better. Usually that's not the case. Usually it's simply a lack of information. And so that's a driving force for us to educate our community as to why certain things happen the way they happen.
Do you think though, so back to Councilmember Spokley's, first, thank you for that response, but back to Councilmember Spokley's comment though, that he called non-emergency, but got a text that said, thank you for calling 911. Does the language need to be tweaked a little bit? Because the reason we were talking about it is I got a message from somebody who received it and they said, I didn't call 911. So I don't know why I got this. And so I'm just curious if maybe there's an ability to differentiate 911 from non-emergency, maybe generalize the statement, because I would just hate for you to lose the feedback loop that you are building with people who didn't call 911, but get a text message about that.
That's absolutely something we're evaluating. I see the logic behind there. I mean, one is we want to make sure that it's a recognizable title for people that don't necessarily know the structure of local government. But then again, we also don't want to mislead them by trying to make it kind of too juvenile. So we're looking at that.
Again, thank you guys. I appreciate what you brought forward. And again, that feedback loop to the community. And then more importantly, though, for you guys to follow up on those ones and those twos, so that you can ensure there wasn't a misperception, or more importantly, address that concern that you're not going to get in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but making that connection that somebody is a 1, because I'd rather you know that they were a 1 before we know that they were a 1.
Councilwoman Dowden Cavill?
Yes, I just wanted to thank you very much for the presentation today. It's very informational and really appreciate your efforts to ensure we have great customer service. So, and that we're responsive. So really no questions, just a comment.
Would you like to add?
I'm going to echo what everyone was saying. I also was saying that I'm glad you answered that we follow up with the low scores, because I think that that's important because people like to be heard. I did have a question for our staff that get continuous good scores. Do we reward them anyway? Or, I mean, I always love rewarding staff that are doing a good job. Do we do anything around that? Or do you have times where you will read out some positive comments that are especially good or anything like that, just to kind of give some people some credit?
So the version I showed was the kind of wall of all the positive score. When it's actually on the monitors, and trust me, you'll get a tour once they're live. We're working on the vendor getting it built out right now. It'll actually be kind of a slow scroll of individual comments with the associated officer. So it will be identifiable when it actually rolls out. As to any type of reward, everybody would get a reward
I know.
Unfortunately,
But that's good. I like, I would everyone gets
Yeah.
awards. The other thing too is great response rate. I do survey stuff for work and that is just astronomical in comparison to what you normally get for response rates on surveys. So that's great.
one thing I wanted to add, I included in my last presentation, I believe we were or will be the 11th agency to implement Live 911. I believe last time I checked, there were only 6 agencies in California that have Q-Hit Live. I'm not aware of any other vendor like them, and none of them are in the region. So yet again, we're really leading kind of our model here.
Great, thank you.
And again, thank you. I want to thank you on behalf of the city council too. And I do want to say, the success of an organization is feedback and acting on the feedback. And so this is critical. And I'm very pleased that you have the technology to do this and that you're taking it real serious and improving and supporting the officers and your entity. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Canam. So that brings us to city manager report.
Mayor and Council, just really quick. So we've just ended one budget year. We start another. It's this really uneasy dance as we're looking to pay last year's bill and in the current fiscal year, but we're currently doing that transition into the next fiscal year, which is a good thing. Something that's going to be coming back to the council is the overall strategic plan, which is going to come in basically 3 different formats. One will be an online format. The second will be a very condensed version of the strategic plan. That'll be more of the pamphlet. But one of the biggest things I'm working to do is I'm pulling the entire budget into the strategic plan. So it is not, we're planning on doing these things. These are the things that are being funded, and it's more of a doing document than a planning document on things. So we're going to make sure that it's reflected that way. One of the key aspects of the overall strategic plan and the budget is modernization. Tonight, as we were talking about the Fire Ad Hoc Committee, you hit on the most important thing, being data-driven, looking at the properties that are actually being addressed, those that aren't, getting ratings, how are we doing on various things. Last week, I can tell you that I met with some of our staff. We talked about GIS, getting them trained, getting them up to speed on the use of data, the acquisition of the data, how to manipulate it, how to gather it, and how to then produce it into some results. So look for us to do is we're going to start moving and transitioning into a more modern organization. That presentation that you just got from the Auburn police team is reflective of where our organization is going. You see how we're actually going to be getting information out from people. We're going to analyze it, and then we're going to do stuff with it. I will tell you that probably one of the biggest things that we're focusing on are our staff. Looking at our overall training. Last week, we sent out a survey to all of our employees to get them to update their overall employee development program. Very important. The idea of setting goals, identifying the training that they're going to get, which we will set an expectation that will correlate straight into the strategic plan things for their department. So it's the idea that we're going to set certain expectations, then we're going to make sure we get those things done. We'll look at training. We're going to look at wellness. Our employees see a lot of things out there. Seven of our life-saving awards last year for people who save people's lives with Narcan. Our employees are seeing some crazy things out there right now. We need to make sure we're taking care of them. Finally, I'd like to highlight some members of our team, which are our public works maintenance crew. There's only 7 of them. It's not like there's an army of these folks who are out doing all of our field services. I can tell you that they're out fixing sidewalks in advance of some of the street maintenance things we're doing. They're fixing our fire stations, literally tearing out everything, replacing floor joists, wall joists, everything that they've got going. they're trying to get rid of all the weeds.
Yeah.
This whole thing about climate change where it's kind of winter, then spring, and then kind of winter again, and then spring, and then summer, then spring again. Please be patient with the weeds because I don't think there's any way that we're going to catch these things this year. And then finally, trees. One of the things that happened is as an Auburn property owner whose tree went from green to brown in a matter of like 2 weeks. Our public works crews are dealing with a lot of dead trees out there. So I can't say enough for the public works maintenance team. They're small, they're mighty. They're very talented. Mostly I would describe them as very committed to our community. Very proud of what they're doing. So that's my report.
Thank you very much. Comprehensive report. So due to the time, we've been here early and we're going to adjourn in a minute, but we have one announcement.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know we're going to forego the committee reports. I just wanted to report to the council that we had our League of Cities, our Cal Cities meeting on Friday, the division for Sacramento Valley Division, and yours truly was elected as the second vice president. So I am I needed one more thing, and so I have it, but I'm hoping to use that to push Auburn forward on some of these issues, like especially fire. So I just want to let you know that I am now the second vice president. So
thank you for your hard work. Congratulations. Thank you. So we will adjourn tonight, but we will adjourn in honor of Florence Laddick. And Florence Laddick worked for 10 years for the Placer County Assessors before being employed with the city of Auburn. And she ran for and was elected the city clerk in 1964. That's her beautiful picture, serving for 28 years until her retirement in 1992. And in 1987, she was elected president for a one-year term to serve as head of the California State City Clerk Association. So I would like to adjourn in her honor and thank you for putting her picture up there.
Thank you.
So with that,